Reborn as the Viking pirate king. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 526 Desert Walking, 3. After 7 days of slow progress, when the caravan's supply of fresh water had nearly dried up, Old Hash finally reached their first water source. For 7 days, there was neither wind nor waves. The caravan journeyed daily through the scorching, fine sand, with 7 consecutive days of clear skies. The azure sky was as clear as if washed by water, with not a speck of sand or even a cloud in sight. The merchant's journey was also remarkably smooth. Not only did they encounter no bandits, but they encountered no desert creatures. The scholars, new to the desert, who were part of the group, had a pleasant time these past few days. The beautiful scenery, the slow journey, and the plentiful food and water made it feel like a trip. The goods sold in Memphis's shops were so cheap that Old Hash, before leaving the city, made an exception and bought a dozen hams and over 20 barrels of ale as a reward for his companions. Good food and drink made the journey less tiring. The porters and laborers were overjoyed at the prospect of receiving generous sums of gold after completing their missions. Some even took out ice during their nighttime work, gambling in advance of the harvest. Only a few veterans of the caravan, like Old Hash and Sa, felt a subtle sense of danger, like a leech. After 40 years of traversing the Black Desert, Old Hash's understanding of the land was no different from that of a freeman. Outsiders imagine the Black Desert as a desolate land of life. The truth is far from that. Perhaps the bandits had gotten lost for some unknown reason. But not a single wild animal was encountered along the way. It was as bizarre as walking through the empty streets of Constantinople. For 3 days, the caravan's path was devoid of venomous scorpions and sand snakes, the night-hunting sand foxes, hyenas, scavenging vultures soaring overhead, and swarms of dung beetles transporting dung balls. This desert seemed cast under some kind of life-forbidding spell. Brother Sa, do you remember the Great Flood 12 years ago? Old Hash's face was grave, his mind heavy throughout the journey. The desert is synonymous with aridity, but that doesn't mean there's never a drop of rain here. The Black Desert is a strange place, with droughts often lasting months, even years. When it rains, it's torrential. 7 or 8 days of torrential downpours are not a blessing for desert life. Most of the time, they spell catastrophic destruction. In his 40 years of wandering the desert, Old Hash had only encountered one rainstorm. That experience was unforgettable. Raindrops nearly the size of cattle and horses fell from the sky, mixing with the fine sands in the sea of sand, transforming the entire land into a vast ocean of mud and sand. Just over 10 minutes after the downpour began, the dry desert had transformed into a vast ocean. The torrent, surging down the sand dunes, swept away the entire caravan's horses and cargo. Amidst the torrent of mud and water, Old Hash devoutly chanted the name of the Fire King while clinging to a shattered car door. The surging mud and water eventually swept him into a low, abandoned pyramid. 7 days later, he managed to escape the devastating downpour by feeding on bats in the top-floor burial chamber. Desert creatures, as if equipped with some kind of weather-sensing mechanism, sought shelter before disaster struck. That year, the desert was remarkably empty, just as he now found himself. No. Boss, there's something different. Having experienced that catastrophe firsthand, Sa immediately understood what Old Hash meant. On the eve of the rainstorm, although this desert was equally quiet and empty, the sky above was perpetually thick with dark clouds, and the air was thick with moisture. It was completely different from the clear blue skies and unusually dry conditions of this journey. Brother, aren't you a little too nervous? The number of free people has decreased for no apparent reason, the desert creatures have vanished, and even the sand bandits have vanished. Combined with the large number of traveling merchants gathered in Memphis, and the fact that no one at the Sand Lake Inn has returned safely, something major must have happened in this desert that I haven't experienced. It's a pity we can't yet ascertain what exactly they encountered. Old Hash didn't voice his thoughts. As a veteran caravaner, he knew that most of his men had never experienced the harsh realities of the desert. Leading so many newcomers into the desert, the most taboo is to spread fear without reason. Often, people frighten themselves to death. Extreme fear can lead them to behave in strange and unusual ways, behaviors that are most likely to cause trouble. I hope I'm overthinking. After observing through his telescope for a long time, Hash led his horse into the ruins of a city. This was the caravan's 8th day's stop, and the first water source since leaving Memphis. It was an abandoned ancient city. Centuries of erosion had reduced most of the buildings to ruins, leaving only the thick, sturdy walls. Finding fresh water in the desert was always exciting. Porters and laborers rushed in noisily. Before even entering the city, some were already removing their robes, preparing to draw up well water for a refreshing hot shower. Everyone entered the ancient city in an orderly manner through the collapsed gates, except for the meesters, who held on to their horses and remained outside the city walls. "Don't you think this city is a bit?" Sisyphus was halfway through when Mergwin nodded gently. "It's definitely not right. From the outside, it certainly doesn't conform to the characteristics of ancient Egyptian architecture. The architecture of ancient Egyptian civilization possessed very distinctive features. Blessed by the outer gods, the old gods, and a vast army of chosen slaves, their building materials primarily consisted of smooth marble from the depths of the northern continent. Their construction techniques were so advanced that, in most cases, stonemasons could perfectly shape the stone into their desired form. The stonework in Egyptian buildings resembled the riveting of Eastern continent carpenters, allowing tens of tons of marble to fit together with perfect seams. The cement, liquid, solidified stone, commonly used in Mediterranean civilizations was easily eroded by wind and sand, and lacked the smoothness of pure stone. Therefore, it was considered a skill reserved for inferior craftsmen by the pharaohs. All large-scale structures in ancient Egypt, such as tombs, temples, city walls, and obelisks, refrained from cement. Their complete rock composition allowed these structures to endure for thousands of years. Hieroglyphs, closely resembling paintings, were a key form of artistic expression for the ancient Egyptians. After completing construction, craftsmen would paint the city walls with pigments made from stone powder to depict the achievements of their lords and the history of their cities. All major cities bear large, hand-painted inscriptions by priests on their important buildings. The city walls, the very foundation of a city, often feature vast scrolls depicting the lord to whom the city belongs, their origins, their deities, and their subordinates. Yet, the outer walls of the city old Hash entered were pristine, devoid of color. Dismounting his horse, Mergwin touched them, and immediately felt a mottled texture on his palm. This indicated the walls weren't a single, flat block of stone, but rather, constructed using Mediterranean techniques, using wooden planks and then poured cement. In short, it felt like a city transported from the other side of a distant ocean. Chapter 527 Macedonian Fortress. My guess was correct. This is another military fortress left behind from the Macedonian invasion. The speaker was the least visible of the 8 scholars. He was almost always in the corner of the group, often even avoiding sight. Even the scholars themselves were unfamiliar with him. Historian Huck Raoul, meet everyone. Mergwin was quite impressed. When the chief scholars finalized the expedition roster, the other members had their own research findings from their respective continents. Only Huck Raoul, from the Apennine Peninsula, knew nothing about ancient Egyptian civilization. Despite this, the chief ancient civilization scholar, Hoffman Heinzeli, held him in high esteem, as he had single-handedly bolstered an independent academic field. Byzantine scholars had long stubbornly held Rome as the greatest power in the history of the Western continent. 1,000 years ago, Rome, nestled on the Apennine Peninsula, rose from a fragmented alliance of city-states to conquer Carthage, Persia, and Egypt. At its peak, its territory encompassed the entire Mediterranean Sea, transforming it into a Roman inland sea. 1,000 years later, while the kingdom's territory had faded from its former glory, the existence of the Chamber of Commerce ensured its continued, invisible dominance over all the nations of the Western continent. In terms of national wealth, religious beliefs, and technological sophistication, the Byzantine Empire far surpassed all other kingdoms in the Western continent. They inherited Rome's legacy and perfectly embodied the concept of democracy and republic. However, Huck Raoul firmly believed that Rome was not the most powerful nation in Western continental history. Gaius Octavian, known as Augustus, was not the most outstanding emperor in the history of the Western continent. Centuries before Rome's rise, an emperor once known as Alexander achieved even more astonishing feats. At the peak of his power, the kingdom of Macedonia he led conquered nearly half of the known world. It was this Alexander the Great who first destroyed Egypt. Most of the scholars in the citadel scoffed at Huxley's research. The library's collection, after all, already reached a staggering 53,000 volumes. Within these 50,000 volumes, both old and new, contained only a handful of lines mentioning Alexander the Great. Only 2 or 3 ancient manuscripts hinted that the Egyptian port of Alexandria, located on the Mediterranean coast, was named after this king. As for the reason for the name, there was no other explanation. Of all the scholars, only Huxley saw this as irrefutable proof that Alexander the Great had existed. By around 500 BCE, while ancient Egypt had lost the glory of 1,000 years before, it remained a colossus dominating the northern continent. There was no other way to convince the proud pharaoh to name his land after him except to conquer him directly on the battlefield. Naturally, the other scholars scoffed at his idea. If such an emperor truly existed in the long history of the western continent, if he truly, as Huxley claimed, waged war all the way from the western continent to the vicinity of ancient India, his kingdom would not have vanished into history in just a few decades. Rome would undoubtedly have recorded this so-called Principality of Macedonia. Bards would have composed at least 1,000 ballads, not to mention books and murals, endlessly commemorating his achievements. Yet, even the most senior vocalists of the Byzantine Empire had never heard of the name Alexander. Rather than a real person, this figure seemed to exist only in Huxley's wild dreams. Huxley shrugged off the glares and doubts around him. While those who doubted him drank coffee and ate cookies, lived in towers and studied ancient scrolls, he himself had spent 3 years walking all the way from the Persian Gulf to ancient India. Along the way, he discovered at least 4 abandoned fortresses with distinctly Greek architecture. These fortresses, hastily erected on the battlefield, have stood the test of thousands of years, their distinct Mediterranean architectural style standing out from the surrounding buildings. This would have been impossible in peacetime. If a noble granted a fiefdom and wished to build a city, recruiting local workers was the most direct and labor-saving method. However, the construction workers on the East-West Land Bridge inevitably employed local techniques. Such fortresses, built entirely in Mediterranean style, could only emerge during wartime. When war broke out, invaders simply couldn't trust the locals to build a marching fortress. Thousands of years later, when Huxley reached out to touch these crumbling walls, they had become marketplaces, battle formations, or even garrisons for Arab troops. The signs of renovation were so severe that the other scholars, looking at the hand-drawn drawings he had painstakingly brought back, could not discern the Mediterranean style he had described. Huxley didn't mind. Truth is destined to be in the hands of a few. A stable and well-functioning society requires 90% of the mortal population to be both foolish and hard-working. Only the truly elite can hold high the torch and light the way for future generations. He had 2 goals in entering the Black Desert. 1. To continue his search for proof of Alexander the Great's existence. The East-West Land Bridge represents an overly prosperous human society. If this emperor had once invaded ancient Egypt, perhaps there would be improvised structures deep in the desert, undamaged too. To discover who had erased all traces of his existence. Huxley had never imagined that on just 3 days into the Black Desert, the location where Old Hash had settled might answer his questions. Touching the walls, eroded beyond recognition by wind and sand, he ignored the other scholars and ventured alone into the ruins. This isn't a city. This is a hastily built garrison. The only irrefutable evidence of Alexander the Great's existence was the Mediterranean port of Alexandria. Huxley was convinced that this man must have invaded ancient Egypt, because in ancient times, only victories in battle granted the right to name a city. Entering the city through the wall, as expected, all the houses were now in a state of disrepair after centuries of wind and sand erosion. The stone and cement construction method commonly used by ancient Greek city-states, while highly efficient, was no match for the prolonged erosion of wind and sand. Most of the houses had collapsed, leaving only half their walls. The only intact structure was a massive stone structure resembling a Greek temple. As the building reached 4 stories tall, the Greek columns that once stood at the entrance had long since collapsed, and even the patterns on them had been largely eroded by the wind and sand. Huxley pulled a brush made of soft horsehair from his pocket and carefully scraped away the thick sand and dirt that had accumulated on the column surfaces. He searched for inscriptions on the columns, but to no avail. The incessant blowing sand had smoothed the hard texture of the Doric stone columns, let alone the ancient Greek inscriptions carved into them. It's not surprising that the stone pillars outside have become like this after being exposed to hot winds and fine sand every day. Perhaps there are other clues in this abandoned building. Hucklauer stood up and was about to step into the stone chamber when a large hand suddenly rested on his shoulder. Looking back, he saw Loki with a solemn expression in his iconic blood axe. "Little brother, close your eyes and smell it carefully. Do you smell anything?" Hucklauer shook his head in confusion. Loki pulled him behind him, pulled out his axe and said lightly, "This is the smell of wet blood." Chapter 528 Macedonian Fortress 2. Every caravan trader traversing the Black Desert must draw upon the wisdom of their predecessors. The route followed by the Hash caravan wasn't discovered by old Hash alone. The master who had introduced him to the trade had come this way. The young Hash was loyal, quick-witted, and a skilled swordsman when necessary. Over time, he earned his master's trust. He followed his master's caravan for 7 or 8 years until he memorized the route. At the age of 18, when young Muhammad Hash first entered the abandoned city, his master warned all his apprentices that to survive along the route, they must suppress their curiosity. From the age of 18 to 58, he returned annually to restock his water supply, but each time, he would rest in a hidden basement. Not only would he explore the ruins, but even to get rid of the water at night, he wouldn't leave this designated room. Hundreds of caravans had spent the night in the ruins, leaving him convinced that no valuable relics remained. If they wandered off, they might stumble upon a pack of hyenas in a hidden corner, or a poisonous scorpion lurking in the fine sand, which would practically spell their doom. This time, the Hashma caravan entered the ruins of the city, and so too did they. Porters and laborers methodically worked the wells, filling empty leather bags with fresh water. The accompanying maids washed and cooked. Aside from the Byzantine scholars, only Loki had left the group. The reason was simple: he smelled blood. Ever since drinking the water of the gods in Asgard and successfully awakening the rare blood of the ancestors within him, his physical prowess surpassed that of a mortal. He could hold his breath underwater for days, run continuously at high speeds for entire days without food or water, and leap 20 or 30 meters from the ground without a problem. Not only had his physical strength greatly improved, but his vision, sense of smell, and even hearing surpassed those of mortals. It was thanks to this body that he was able to roam the desert for days after waking, without food or water, until old Hash discovered him. He knew the strength of this body, so when the faint scent of blood appeared, it immediately alerted him. Blood is the odor of blood mixed with water vapor. The caravan was currently in the center of the dry desert. If the scent came from the carcasses of wild animals, then the number of carcasses was clearly too great. Having just entered the stone chamber, Loki signaled Hucklauer behind him to slow down. It was already afternoon, and the setting sun cast its last rays through the entrance of the abandoned stone chamber, illuminating a mottled stone wall. Instead of the painted hieroglyphs of the freedmen of Memphis, the wall was meticulously inscribed with ancient Greek characters, as if printed. The scholars would be deeply interested in the unique writing of an ancient Mediterranean civilization appearing in the heart of the Black Desert, but to Loki, a time traveler, this was not surprising at all. The first person in human history to directly defeat a pharaoh's army was none other than the Macedonian Emperor Alexander the Great. If we were to rank the most superlative figure in human civilization, Alexander the Great would claim second place, with no one daring to challenge him for first place. Western historians bestow upon certain great individuals special titles. For example, the Great Teacher is bestowed with a unique title Chairman Mao. Another example is Alexander the Great. Throughout human history, there is only one person who has ever been called Alexander the Great. At just 16 years old, he assumed the role of ruling the country on behalf of his father. In just 2 years, he unified all of Greece, bringing all the scattered city-states under his wing. However, this was only the beginning of his quest for supremacy. The Persian Empire, feared by successive Greek leaders, lasted only 4 years against Alexander. 4 years later, the Persian Empire, nestled on the Mesopotamian plains, collapsed. He also in the process annexed Egypt. The conquest of Egypt was a simple, almost unstoppable effort. Alexander barely even felt the need to exert himself. After 2 years of recuperation, he decided to explore unfamiliar lands and continue his eastward march. This emperor spent 5 years defeating the various nomadic tribes along the east-west land bridge, reaching as far as ancient India. Had he not unfortunately died of illness at the young age of 33, if he had lived another 5 years, He would have only needed to skirt the Himalayas and continue eastward for a few hundred kilometers before the 7 warring states would have been forced to face a behemoth charging from the west. Who would unify the central plains remained uncertain. Greek characters were meticulously carved into the walls, much like the ancient sculptures in European towns, where long, neatly arranged lists of names often appear on stone tablets. This is a common Western way of honoring the martyrs. This wall of names likely refers to the men who died during Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt. It's reasonable to expect that there are many similar structures in this desert. Loki's disdain stood in stark contrast to Hekla beside him. In the 21st century, science has completely conquered the world. The basic education most people receive upon entering school already covers nearly 10 different subjects. With the help of powerful internet search engines, even 10-year-olds can recount several stories about Alexander the Great. However, acquiring knowledge in the Middle Ages was exponentially more difficult. Bards, striving for artistic effect, often deliberately blurred the distinction between mortals and the divine. Ancient legends, passed down orally, only became increasingly estranged from reality. Scholars had only 2 ways to uncover the truth. 1. Read the handwritten scrolls left by their ancestors. 2. Visit the ancient sites and verify them with their own eyes. Hugh Crowell pulled a quill and wood pulp paper from his pocket and began rapidly recording the decipherable text still visible on the creaking stone walls. This list was crucial to his research. If any of the deceased individuals on the list appeared in other documents, cross-references would provide irrefutable evidence of the Macedonian conquest of ancient Egypt. Only with this initial piece of evidence could further research be conducted. However, just after writing 2 lines, the sun set behind the mountains, and the last ray of light on the horizon quickly faded. The brief loss of vision was accompanied by a sharp increase in his sense of smell. Loki, gripping his axe, stepped deeper into the stone chamber. The faint scent of blood suddenly intensified in the airless, narrow chamber. In the pitch darkness, he lit a torch. The scene before him was a terrifying sight he would never forget. Chapter 529 Macedonian Fortress, 3. Old Hash finally understood why he hadn't seen a single bandit group along the way. The interior of the abandoned stone chamber had become a bloody hell. Nearly 200 scattered human corpses, along with dozens of horses, were piled in the cramped space. The desert was exceptionally dry, and with few microorganisms, the bodies decomposed slowly. Judging from the bloody mess at Luogi's base, the bandits had likely been dead for 7 or 8 days. The dry, hot desert wind blew in through the doorway, leaving some of the blood, which had dried, dark red marks on the ground. The perpetrator of this massacre seemed to have calculated the bandits' destination. He waited until everyone had entered the stone chamber, then used some unknown sorcery to instantly blast everyone inside into a pool of gore. Only weapons, saddles, and the hard horseshoes scattered around the edges could roughly identify their identities. Old Hash, suppressing the discomfort in his stomach, used a wooden stick to pick up a few pieces of bloody clothing floating on the thick pulp of flesh and blood. From their clothing and weapons, he could discern 4 distinct groups of desert bandits within the room. The killers must have used some method to unite these 4 separate factions, then wipe them out in one swift, clean sweep. The question then arose, who could have carried out such a brutal act? Old Hash's first choice was the Arab governor of Memphis. At that time, the Arab Empire stretched eastward to the Pamir Mountains and the Caucasus Mountains, and westward across the Eurasian land bridge, all the way to the Mediterranean. With such vast territories, no noble would want to be exiled to the desolate Sahara Desert in the northern continent. The result of being so far away from the empire was that the governors became unchecked rulers. The persistent swarms of desert bandits outside Memphis were 90% due to the inaction of these officials. Each governor returned to civilized society with cartloads of gold and silver. While there was no direct evidence, Old Hash suspected a significant portion of this was bribes paid to the governors by the desert bandits. The bandits targeted not only caravan merchants but also freemen heading to the city to purchase goods. Even after 40 years of traveling this route, Old Hash had encountered few true followers of the ancient gods. The few who did exist were extremely limited in combat power. Most of the stories he told in Constantinople's shop were false, otherwise he wouldn't have been so embarrassed after being exposed by the scholar. The reason was the same old one. This world never mistreats the powerful. Only in strange stories do powerful hermits exist, living on sparse food and living in the mountains. In the real world, Every chosen one with even a modicum of power wears gold and silver, lives in luxurious mansions provided by nobles, and enjoys the tender caress of maids and the finest food every day. So when Heath Brancher mentioned the ghost marriage ritual to him, he wasn't surprised at all. If he were a powerful Styx priest, he would undoubtedly seek to befriend the rich and powerful. Whether in life or spiritual practice, these officials would make his life smoother. Capable of slaughtering over 200 bandits at once, shattering them, horses and all, to smithereens. Old Hash was certain that a formidable force of such power wouldn't linger in the heart of the Black Desert. Unless they were carrying out a mission assigned by some powerful figure. But then again, who would be so reckless as to venture hundreds of kilometers into the desert to harass a group of bandits? Was it a beast? Impossible. Wild beasts kill for one reason, to fill their stomachs. No beast would cause such a large-scale slaughter and then drag all the corpses into its chamber without consuming a single bite. Desert beasts, constantly plagued by hunger, devour their prey, skin and bones alike. In extreme hunger, they would devour even the linen clothing of a mortal. After eliminating all the possible answers, traveling caravan merchants seemed the only option. But this was the most unlikely scenario. All the merchants in Memphis had noticed a strange decrease in the number of freedmen in the desert in recent months. Of the few camel caravans that had entered the desert, none had returned after crossing the Quicksand River. After August, the Hash caravan was the only Western continent merchant group to advance from Memphis into the Black Desert. He pondered for a long time, but found no clue. The thick, bloody odor within the sealed stone chamber irritated his scalp, and this feeling of powerlessness, deep within his soul, only deepened his disquiet. Especially since the blood on the ground had mostly dried to a dark brown, oily layer. With so many bodies piled there, no creature in the desert came to feed. Not even a single hyena, let alone a sandfox, could be seen inside the chamber. This seemed even more suspicious. Never mind, let's call it a day. Ever since leaving the city, Old Hash felt like every inch of his skin felt uncomfortable. After much deliberation, he decided to seal the stone chamber's door and force himself to forget the scene before him. There's no need to waste energy burying their bodies. No wild animals have calm to feed in days, so one night is probably enough. Whoever killed these bandits, we can at least determine two things. 1. He's disappeared. 2. He's not our enemy. Otherwise, Old Hash didn't say the second half of his sentence. If this mysterious person wanted to attack them, he could simply hide in the ruins of the city, wait for the Hash caravan to fall asleep at night, and then kill them unnoticed. Lord of Fire, thank you for watching over the believers holding the flame in the wilderness. I will continue to faithfully carry out your will and spread the flame of faith to the ends of the earth. On the way back to their habitat, Old Hash gazed at the torch in his hand, muttering to himself. The scholar knew it would be years before they could venture into the desert again, so they cherished this hard-earned archaeological opportunity. Although darkness fell and the city ruins were pitch black, they still lit torches and did their best to record the decipherable words on the walls. The sudden appearance of a large number of corpses only alerted Old Hash. But the caravan's porters and laborers were unfazed, and even Loki dismissed it as a minor concern. Most of the world's evil stems from poverty. In the bitter cold of Scandinavia, Vikings from different provinces might even engage in bloody clashes over a few lambs. Back in Hanshu village, Jerome's wife, Katya, brazenly killed the storm monk on the holy mountain for a few herbs. She harbored no sense of guilt. In her eyes, there was little difference between living humans and beasts. If Hanshu village hadn't seen improved economic conditions, she might have dragged the bodies back and chopped them up to feed the dogs. In Loki's eyes, the pile of corpses was likely simply the result of internal conflict among the sand bandits, a coincidence of their deaths in the midst of internecine slaughter. As for the tragic deaths, frankly, this world still holds many mysteries. Countless outer gods and ancient gods still linger in the corners of the world. The rise of navigation and flight technology has allowed mortals to frequently explore their secluded realms. The powers bestowed upon mortals by these gods are truly diverse. Killing their own kind, using any method, is no longer surprising to them. Chapter 530, River of Quicksand. The next morning, after a good night's rest, the Hashma caravan set out on their journey again. The sky remained as deep blue as the ocean, and with the wind shifting, the dry air from the north surprisingly lacked any burning sensation. In the Middle Ages, human civilization was primarily concentrated in the east and west continents. The New World, fueled by booming commerce, was slowly being absorbed into the mainstream. However, What lay hidden in the vast lands north of the Sahara Desert remained a mystery to most residents of the Western continent. The reason was simple: there were virtually no cities on this continent. No explorer would dare to travel south from the Black Desert by camel, as even the freemen had no idea where the water source lay hidden in the desert beyond. The only way to explore south of the Black Desert was to sail along the coastline. But ships also needed supplies. There were no towns or even human presence along the way. The unbroken coastline was dominated by towering rocky mountains, with even sandy beaches scarce. Some ships carried psychics, who attached their spiritual senses to flying birds and saw that where the endless desert ended was an endless expanse of rocky mountains. Some explorers, running out of ammunition and food, seemingly climbed the coast, traversing for 3 days and 3 nights, only to discover a primeval jungle teeming with snakes as thick as buckets. Of the 10 explorers who ventured out, only 2 were lucky to return. And for those lucky few who managed to return in time, each of their navigational records differed significantly from the maps they drew. In the Middle Ages, only the romantic Emperor Li Longji, presiding over a terrifying empire, would mobilize the entire nation, sending thousands of troops to every corner of the 9 continents to create a general map of the world for the benefit of all mankind. He completed only a small portion. Other scholars, either missing or suffering accidents, hid in the corners of the world, and ultimately, with the collapse of the Tang dynasty, they died forever with their unfinished scrolls. After leaving their 3rd-day base, the Hash Horse caravan slaughtered their useless horses as they continued their journey deeper into the Black Desert. 4 days later, they arrived at their next stop. The desiccated skeleton scattered before Loki, atop an abandoned stone tower, struck him as eerily familiar. Judging by their appearance, they must have been dead a long time ago. The relentless, dry, hot winds had transformed the flesh and blood of the corpses into leather as hard and dry as rotten wood. Yet, the wooden tabletop within the room, repurposed from a vehicle, remained intact. Reaching out to push aside the accumulated sand, he felt a piece of soft leather beneath the yellow sand. Inscribed prominently on the leather were the words "Overall Atlas of the World." The leather cover bore the same resemblance to the Overall Atlas of the World, the submerged city volume he had received from Old Valder 17 years prior. The erosion of the wind and sand had reduced the fragile paper within trash, and aside from the leather cover, nothing remained from the tower's summit. As expected, these skeletons were likely the same as Mo Yiquan, who had penetrated the sunken city, and Xiaolu, the traveler who had led the fleet north to the land of eternal night. They had penetrated the Black Desert to create maps for the Eastern Tang dynasty, but for unknown reasons, perished atop the ruined tower of this city. "Lord Loki, have you found anything on the top of the tower?" Mergwin's voice rang out from beneath them. The main reason these skeletons were able to remain atop the stone tower was that the wooden steps within the stone structure had completely crumbled. The lack of stairs, coupled with the building's dilapidated exterior, made it unsafe. Among the Hashma gang, only Loki could leap 20 meters from the ground to the top of the stone tower. Aside from the skeletons, leather book covers beneath the yellow sand, a few rotten swords as brittle as eggshells, 3 or 4 telescopes, and a dozen or so tattered silver coins, all remaining on the tower's summit. All the other belongings of the Tang dynasty explorers had corroded into dust. In a few decades, even these bones would turn to sand, leaving the entire room bare of any trace of human activity. It was almost sunset again. Standing atop the tower, facing the setting sun, a thick river of fine yellow sand slowly moved beneath the dunes where everyone lived. This was the Quicksand River, a natural wonder found only in the Black Desert. With one last glance at the withered skeletons, Loki leaped to the ground. Like the other villages we passed, this tower top is bare. Shortly after he leaped, Hans Welsh's rhythmic voice echoed from nearby. During these past few days' journey, he had acted less like a master than a guide leading a field trip. Wherever he went, he would point to the ruins and offer a scathing exposition, drawing on his half-baked knowledge. Unlike the bards who spouted nonsense, the maester's stories often had some basis in reality. The journey was so smooth that a significant number of the caravan members spontaneously gathered around him to listen to his stories of the ancient history of this land. 7 years ago, the Citadel Library received a large stack of books of the dead from a traveling merchant. One page recorded a shipbuilder's journey to the underworld after his death. Osiris, the Egyptian god of the underworld, greatly respected his talent and even granted him the privilege of retaining his memories after reincarnation, allowing him to continue building even more powerful ships. The shipbuilder considered this journey to the underworld a supreme honor, and he even had his own design depicted on papyrus by a Styx priest, to be buried with him. The chief scholars observed the wooden boat's shape and felt that this massive steel vessel was vastly different from our common vessels. After careful study and comparison, they discovered that the carpenter's boat was designed specifically for the flowing sand river. In the early civilizations of this continent, this flowing sand river served as a passage for many pharaohs to transport massive stone materials. They would transport huge steel vessels to the sand river, load them with stone, and then sail down it. Everyone, turn around and take a look. The village we're staying in tonight was where the ancient Egyptians docked their ships and unloaded their cargo. This sand river is completely different from the rushing rivers of other continents. Water is a highly reflective and transparent substance. At night, it reflects moonlight and starlight, allowing ferries to clearly see the riverbanks and avoid run-ins. But the quicksand of this sand river appears identical to the land on either side at night. To help the slaves who steered the boats identify the riverbanks, towering lighthouses were built on both sides of the river. At night, a blazing fire would burn atop the lighthouses, guiding the ships on the sand river. Our respected King Loki has just entered an ancient lighthouse that has been abandoned for at least 2,000 years. Chapter 531, River of Quicksand, 2. More and more porters gathered around Hans Welsh. As they did so, the sun slowly sank behind the western dunes. The sky and earth were once again shrouded in a thick darkness. The unique fine sands of the Black Desert reflected no light at night. Standing there at night was like standing on the roof of a black hole. The leader of the caravan, Mohammed Hash, smoked a cigarette while gazing at the flickering campfire before him. The accompanying mate had already placed the prepared meat and bread beside him, but he was lost in thought for a long time, frozen like a statue in a black robe. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. He raised his eyelids to glance at his men, who were happily gambling and laughing, and smacked his forehead in frustration. This journey has been so smooth it's almost deceptive, so much so that my men's laziness has inadvertently affected me. We shouldn't rest tonight, but rather take advantage of the clear night sky and make a lasting effort to cross the Quicksand River. 5 years of rest in the city have dulled my resolve. Sitting next to old Hash was Abdul Lsh, the caravan's captain of guard. The two had been trading together for quite some time, and he knew his old friend's every trade. His nose for danger was as sharp as a rabbit's. This unique ability had kept him alive for over 20 years as he journeyed in and out of the desert. But constant anxiety had also left him with a fair amount of gray hair and wrinkles at the age of 58. As an old man of the Black Desert, Sa could sense the strangeness of this journey, but by then, Hash's caravan was like an arrow shot from a bow, with no chance of returning to its quiver. Don't be nervous, boss, Sa said, bringing a cup of piping hot milk tea from the fire and pressing it into old Hash's hands. Although we've rested for a while, among all the merchants making a living along this route, no one knows it better than we do. If my feeling is correct, the most dangerous part of this journey is the section between Memphis and the Shifting Sands. If we can cross the Shifting Sands, we'll enter the Cold Belt in 7 days at the latest, 5 at the fastest. The Cold Belt the caravan merchants refer to as an uninhabited area in the inner Sahara Desert, devoid of anything but slowly drifting yellow sand. There's no water, no plants, no animals. Leading the team safely through the Cold Belt is the ultimate test for every caravan merchant. But old Hash, with his unique ability to find his way, finds this uninhabited corridor remarkably safe. Even so, worry lingers on his face. We've been traveling this route for so many years, and I've never encountered 7 consecutive days of clear sunshine. If the Black Desert were so easy to navigate, our former friends would still be alive. According to official statistics from Memphis, each year, more than 1/3 of the caravans that leave the city and enter the Black Desert are lost at the Shifting Sands. A significant number of them lost their way near the riverbank, unable to find a crossing. Others encountered a sandstorm and camped by the river for over 10 days, ultimately running out of food and water and forced to turn back. Crossing the Quicksand River was a challenge every caravan faced. Different teams chose to build pontoon bridges at different crossing points. Some were easy, others more complex. A long night brings many dreams, an eternal law of this land. I have a bad feeling. I feel a sandstorm is very likely tomorrow morning. We shouldn't rest tonight. We should build a pontoon bridge and prepare to cross the river overnight. Even if we sleep all day and all night after crossing, at least we'll be safe. There were no sand bandits, no wild animals, and no ancient monsters. The journey was so smooth that even after entering the desert, the ever-present sense of danger vanished. Everyone believed it was a journey blessed by the Wage King. But the empty stables and the mountains of saddles inside the sand lake told him that the desert, far from becoming docile, was in fact more violent than ever. He was no chosen one. The Cinder King treated everyone equally. The fact that he had made it this far without any problem simply meant that his share of danger hadn't arrived yet. Haha, boss, you're just too nervous. Sandstorms hit this desert 8 out of 10 days. Even if the sun-god Horus turned his hourglass back, what difference would it make? He'd braved the wind and sand to cross the river before. Don't worry, a good night's sleep will bring another sunny day. With that, Sa downed the last sip of his hot tea, crawled under his blanket, and fell into deep sleep. Old Hash, on the other hand, continued to gaze at the flames, closing his eyes and softly reciting the gospel prayer from the Flame Bible, praying for a blessing on this strange journey. The next morning, the caravan was awakened by a severe cold snap. When the porters and laborers pulled back the blankets, they found that the campfire in the center of the house had long been extinguished. Not only that, but cold sand continued to pour in from the roof and door of the abandoned house, burying most of their bodies beneath the dense yellow sand. After digging his companions out of the yellow sand, Old Hash quickly ran out of the stone chamber and saw flying yellow sand and a dark chaos in the sky. It seemed that his good luck had finally run out. Seeing the dark sky and the extremely thick sandstorm, Old Hash was not discouraged. Instead, he felt an inexplicable sense of peace in his heart. This was the black desert he was familiar with. If the journey went too smoothly, he'd feel a sense of unwarranted panic. Don't be afraid, brothers. This weather is the desert's true nature. There's no water here. Even if we're braving a sandstorm, we must immediately prepare to cross the quicksand river. The elders in the caravan understood how to navigate this precarious situation. They built a massive campfire, then lit torches and placed them in everyone's hands. Visibility is low in the sandstorm, and once the wind picks up, sound won't be able to travel reliably. With limited visibility, everyone must hold their torches tightly. The light will mark your position. If the flame dies out, immediately find the nearest light source and relight your torch. Finally, don't fall behind. If you fall behind in this kind of weather, no one will be able to find you. Do you understand? The loud response from his subordinates made Old Hash feel very relieved. This was the difficulties-filled journey he was familiar with. In just 1 hour, all the members were ready to set off. More than 100 carriages were connected together front and back, and all the horses' eyes were covered with the black cloth. In this way, on the one hand, it can prevent the wind and sands from blocking the horses' eyes and causing them to walk around randomly. And on the other hand, it can also prevent these animals from panicking. As usual, Old Hash rode the lead horse at the front of the team. There was chaos ahead, and he couldn't see anything either. But he was just like a blind man at home. Old Hash was so familiar with this route that when the blurry sun in the sky rose to the center of his head, he had led the caravan to the bank of the Quicksand River. Chapter 532, River of Quicksand, 3. Nature operates according to its own rules. During periods of heavy rain, flowing water from the highlands merges with streams, ultimately causing the downstream valley to swell and surge violently. This is also true of the massive river of quicksand in the Black Desert. Despite its vast territory, the Sahara is surrounded by the sea on 2 sides. Monsoon winds hurl fine sand, like talcum powder, into the sky, where it falls slowly like rain. Once accumulated, the quicksand rapidly flows along the terrain, eventually merging into the Quicksand River. Old Hash regretted his decision to rest early last night precisely because clear weather makes crossing the Quicksand River much easier. Quicksand accumulates relatively low in the valley and flows less rapidly. A quicksand river in a sandstorm takes on a completely different appearance. Even a few hundred meters from the river valley, the caravan could already see a dark yellow wall of smoke rising in the distance. As the caravan drew closer, everyone could sense the thick, yellow sand obscuring the sky, significantly reducing visibility after only a few dozen meters. Hold your torches high. Find a way to let the troops ahead and behind you clearly see your position. He shouted a single word hastily, and the dry, windy sand immediately filled Old Hash's mouth, forcing him to shut up. Speaking into the fierce winds of a sandstorm was an extremely strenuous endeavor. Even when 2 people were face to face and very close, they needed to shout loudly for the other to hear. Old Hash glanced behind him with concern. He could only see 2 dim flames behind him, and in the distance, a chaotic, Dark yellow, I've given all the necessary instructions before setting off. If anything goes wrong, it's probably the Lord of Fires will, signaling his men behind him to slow down. Old Hash fetched a sturdy wooden stick and, like a blind man, probed the ground ahead every 2 steps. To cross the quicksand river in a sandstorm, the first thing to do was avoid falling into the riverbed. The closer they got to the river valley, the more violent the surging, drifting sand became. Mortals couldn't even discern the terrain ahead with their eyes. On the outskirts of the river valley, they were no different from blind men. Old Hash walked for nearly an hour, covering just a few hundred meters. After ensuring his stick had touched solid rock, his next step was to approach the riverbed and find a milestone. It wasn't just caravans and merchants who needed to cross the quicksand river. Freedmen living deep in the desert also needed to cross this swirling sand river to reach Memphis to purchase scarce food, salt, and other daily necessities. As commerce flourished, more and more freedmen came to rely on the goods sold by the merchant guild. To ensure a more stable crossing, they also had to consider the crucial issue of how to cross the quicksand river during sandstorms. Therefore, the freedmen had buried milestones around each river crossing. Old Hash felt his way along the riverbed, and after a few dozen steps, he finally found a massive marble block, over a meter tall. This massive stone pillar, resembling a tombstone, bore no decoration except for an arrow and 3 Greek numerals. Turn left, continue 122 meters. Frequent sandstorms had forced the freedmen to devise this plan. As long as they could find the edge of the quicksand river and follow its banks, they would inevitably encounter a stone tablet marking the direction and distance after every few dozen meters. This way, they could roughly estimate the ferry's location. Fortunately, we weren't far from the ferry. Hash silently chanted a few words of praise for the Fire King again. The extremely low visibility in a sandstorm often made it impossible to discern the direction of travel. The caravan wasn't far from the ferry at this moment. As the sun overhead passed its midpoint and gradually tilted westward, Old Hash knew the caravan had to hurry. Even though the vision was all dark yellow during the daytime sandstorm, it was still possible to clearly see about 10 meters in front of them. At night, the fine, almost non-reflective sand gripped the surface like a giant hand, leaving visibility reduced to less than 2 meters. Walking through the pitch-black desert was like stepping into a viscous black hole. Even the most experienced caravans and merchants might not escape unscathed. According to official Memphis statistics, there are 6 known crossings on the quicksand river, but the actual number is far greater. It's almost an open secret that the Arab governors within the city often collude with the desert bandits outside. Bandits are often seen lurking around the 6 known crossings, a key reason why the major merchant guilds never venture beyond the city walls. Each of the large caravans that frequented the Black Desert maintained its own crossing. The one Old Hash chose was a seemingly dilapidated iron chain bridge. In ancient times, this was a cargo loading and unloading dock. The buoyancy of sand is far greater than that of flowing water. The pharaoh's primary use of this river of quicksand was to transport the heavy stones needed to build their palaces and tombs. 6 massive marble pillars stood atop the river, connected by arches. When a boat floating on the sand reached the center of the pillars, iron cables secured the boat to the left and right pillars. Pullways at the top of the bridge then slowly lowered the heavy stones onto the ferry. After the fall of ancient Egypt, most of the buildings in the sea of sand decayed, but the 6 sturdy marble pillars across the quicksand river remained. Merchants connected the pillars with iron cables to form a simple floating bridge. While this wasn't a hidden ferry crossing, for decades, only a handful of merchants crossed annually. The primary reason for this was the apparent danger of this bridge. Once on board, the iron-forged bridge wobbled, and beneath one's feet, one could immediately see the swirling quicksand. This quicksand was unlike the flowing water of a typical river. A person who falls into water will most likely float, but if they fall into fast-moving quicksand, they will be swept underground in seconds. No one knew the depth of this sand river. But one year, heavy rains lasted for a month, and the currents carried away a large amount of quicksand, exposing part of the riverbed for the first time. The bottom of the sand river was covered with deep caves, like a honeycomb, and within each cave were eerie bones of varying sizes. From beginning to end, there was no end in sight. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 533, River of quicksand. 4. The Lord of Cinder treats all his followers fairly and impartially. During this journey, he had granted his own citadel scholar, Brancher, a wealthy Byzantine merchant, along with hundreds of carts of merchandise he had acquired for free. This was a tremendous boon. Upon reflection, this journey had yielded not only the wealth of a lifetime, but also a promising future through cooperation with the citadel. Furthermore, since leaving Memphis, he hadn't encountered a single band of sand bandits, enjoying over 10 days of uninterrupted good weather. Such a story wouldn't have occurred even in his wildest dreams. Today's sandstorm had given him a sense of foreboding, but once he stepped onto the floating bridge and saw the broken iron cables in its center, he understood it all. God gives, and God takes away. His good fortune came to an abrupt end at this bridge. A sudden sandstorm had caused a massive exodus of sands from the plateau into the quicksand river. The sudden force of the accumulated quicksand destroyed a stone pillar in the center of the river, severing a significant section of the chain bridge. Having traveled this route for over 20 years, he'd encountered this situation before. The best course of action was to turn back. In previous years, Hash's caravan consisted of only a dozen or so wagons, a small team that could adjust freely. But this year, his caravan was 5 times larger, and even with such a bloated force, turning back would be a huge risk. Old Hash breathed a sigh of relief through his thick linen mask. In the face of sudden disaster, negative emotions were useless. The fact had already happened, and the only thing left was to face it. Gripping the chains tightly, he struggled to the side of the security team leader, Abdul Elshi, and leaned his head close to his ear. Just as he shouted the first word, a strong hand settled on his shoulder. Turning back, he met a pair of piercing eyes. Despite the tightly wrapped head, he could still recognize it as Loki, the king of Paris, whom he had found on the dunes outside the Black Desert. Brother Hash, don't panic. In this situation, leave it to me. Of all the caravan members present, only Loki could easily see through the yellow sand. This was due in part to his awakened powerful bloodline, but also to the lingering power of the Crimson Apostle, the Red God's path, still lingering within him. The entire lineage of the Crimson Creator relied on the illusion of blood mist to fight, and the sensation of escaping into the mist was remarkably similar to being in the midst of a sandstorm. His years as a Crimson Apostle had long since accustomed him to abandoning his sight and relying on the psychic energy emanating from his body to perceive his surroundings. Old Hash stepped aside, and Loki, braving the wind and sand, stood at the front of the broken bridge. The surging yellow sand beneath his feet formed a brown wall of sand. Within this wall, he could surprisingly sense a faint psychic energy hidden within it. According to Byzantine scholars, before the founding of ancient Egypt, this land was home to giant, crawling dragons. Several species of dragons found in the Sahara Desert of the northern continent are all ground dragons, their wings having undergone significant degeneration, rendering them flightless and relegated to ground charges. The sand giants, struggling to survive amidst the dragons, had long since carved a stone tablet detailing the existence of the shifting sand river. This vast river once harbored terrifying creatures capable of traversing the sandy depths. In ancient times, numerous outer gods, ancient gods, and old ones inhabited this land, their relentless breathing enriching the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. Even after thousands of years of continuous circulation, this sand river still harbored a faint wisp of spiritual energy. Loki narrowed his eyes. Through the rapidly surging sand before him, he could vaguely discern the outline of the next stone pillar not far ahead. He leaped across the 30-meter gap and landed firmly on the next stone pillar. Then, he witnessed a scene he would never forget. A massive dragon skeleton lay stuck before him, like it had hide a reef. This wasn't a flying dragon bred by the French dragon knights, but a crawling dragon with sturdy limbs, crawling on all fours. It lacked wings, no need for flight. Its body wasn't covered in thin scales, but rather a thick, plated armor like that of ancient dinosaurs. The dragon was long dead, but its armor, even after millennia, remained strong and vibrant. The dragon skeleton had been carried by the quicksand, sliding down from the upper reaches of the flowing sand river. Upon reaching a bridge formed by continuous stone pillars, the heavy and hard dragon skeleton collided with a central pillar, breaking it. The bridge collapsed, and the entire body was stuck in the fractured joint of the pillars. Standing atop the pillar, Loki pondered his predicament. Even though he traversed the pitch-black sand walls more skillfully than any mortal, the blood of the Crimson Apostle within him had been suppressed to very low concentration by the divine water. Each stone pillar of the bridge was approximately 30 meters apart. With one broken in the middle, he could only vaguely sense the direction of the next one. As for jumping, the ancestor's physical prowess far surpassed that of a mortal, but he was no god after all. He could leap 30 meters, but leaping 60 meters from a standing start was impossible. Unless he used the dragon skeleton stuck in the stone pillar as a springboard, stepping onto the bones before leaping to the next pillar. This would be extremely dangerous. The dragon skeleton not far from his feet seemed solid, but it had, after all, withstood thousands of years. Ordinary iron would have become as brittle as an eggshell after such a long period of time. If the dragon skeleton could not withstand the force of his fall and shattered on the spot, the consequences would be catastrophic. The rapidly flowing, fine sand would crush him to the bottom of the river in a flash. Without a relay, and with no buoyancy in the river, even a god would die instantly. What should I do? Caught between a rock and a hard place, he suddenly sensed a phantom figure on the opposite stone pillar. Amidst the surging yellow sands and the immense distance, he couldn't be sure if it was truly a person or just an illusion. Is that a person? If it's a person, isn't he a bit too large? Pulling the scarf from his mouth, Loki shouted at the top of his lungs. But the sound couldn't carry much further in the gusty sand. Rubbing his eyes vigorously, he was just about to leap towards the dragon's corpse when two strong iron chains suddenly flew out from the endless yellow sand. With two muffled thuds, the chains nailed to the stone pillar at Loki's feet. Looking up again, the figure had vanished. Chapter 534, River of Quicksand, 5. Loki didn't tell the rest of the caravan about his encounter on the stone pillar. Regarding the iron chain flung across the river, he simply explained that he'd harnessed the blood of his ancestors to fly across the 60-meter broken bridge, then, upon reaching the other side, tossed a broken chain across and nailed it into the stone pillar. Those familiar with Loki would inevitably find this story riddled with flaws, yet the porters and laborers of Hash's caravan had an almost blind confidence in his abilities. By the time the entire Hash caravan had crossed the shifting sands, it was already late at night. Old Hash was undoubtedly the most experienced merchant in the Black Desert. Bridges collapsing under the boulders and unknown skeletons beneath the yellow sand weren't common occurrences, but they were a common occurrence 2 or 3 times out of 10 before leaving the city. The Byzantine merchant Heathbrancher had handed over 200 golden dinars to join his group. These coins instantly swelled Old Hash's coffers. Before leaving the city, he reinforced his wagon, specifically opting for partially removable plastic steel. In the event of a sudden disaster, simply dismantling the undercarriage would yield repair materials. He dispatched skilled men to crawl along the cables, reinforcing the ropeway while laying the bridge planks. This meticulous work required the bridge to be able to support both horses and vehicles. Fortunately, he had trained these temporary workers before departing from Alexandria. They engaged the bridge planks one by one, hooking them into the cables and reinforcing the base with steel. After a full night of labor, they finally crossed the Quicksand River safely. While counting the number of men at the other end of the bridge, Old Hash discovered that only 2 of his men had been lost at some point. All the misters and the warriors brought by Heathbrancher had made it safely across the bridge. This was truly a miracle. Traveling in the Black Desert late at night was extremely dangerous, especially in a sandstorm like this. Torches could only illuminate a distance of 2 or 3 meters. Beyond that, it was pitch black. In this situation, Old Hash once again demonstrated his abilities. Nearly blind, he led his caravan to the leeward side of a sand dune on the other side of the shifting sand river. After groping along the dunes for hundreds of meters, he finally reached the entrance of an abandoned cave. This was the lair of desert creatures. Outside the cave entrance lay the bones of various beasts, and the walls deeper in the cavern were stained with blood. His ability to find the cave in near total darkness was solely due to his intimate knowledge of the terrain. He crossed this crossing twice a year, both ways. The towers north of the river and the cave south of it were etched in his memory. Even in the darkness, he could find his way with his experience. Once inside the cave, his heart finally settled. While the servants boiled water and cooked, Old Hash, for once, skipped any night watch and fell into deep sleep by the campfire. After leaving Memphis, the smooth yet almost unreal journey had left him in a state of indescribable anxiety for a long time. Until today, they encountered a sandstorm, a broken bridge, and 2 of their companions were lost in the storm. People keep dying. This is the true feeling of walking in this desert. The Black Desert exists to keep travelers in constant danger. If crossing the flowing sand river were easy, King Heron would have completely conquered this land 200 years ago. After a quick meal and a drink, most of the caravan members crawled into their blankets and fell into deep sleep. Even the horses, who usually slept standing up, collapsed in their caves. From outside the cave, the low hum of wind and sand could still be heard. Amidst the snoring, a pair of eyes remained bright. They were Loki's. Years of leading people through hardships had made him more vigilant than ordinary mortals. Only he wasn't basking in the joy of surviving a disaster. He continued to ponder the tall figure that had mysteriously appeared on the opposite bridge pier. Undoubtedly, this was a man of immense combat power. He threw the iron chain, capable of spanning a 60-meter river of sand, with both hands. The heavy nail, trailing a long, heavy chain, flew across such a vast distance, its momentum undiminished, firmly driving it into a marble pillar. Even Loki himself wouldn't have dared to claim such an effortless feat. A person possessing such power must be a high-ranking chosen one. Perhaps even a true god, who in the group possesses such immense power, allowing such a powerful being to secretly escort them. Loki gazed at the flickering campfire, then at the sleeping faces within the cavern, each one seeming suspicious. Finally, his gaze settled on the young girl who had accompanied the scholars throughout their journey. "You're beginning to sense something's amiss, aren't you?" a slightly abrupt voice called from behind him. Turning, he saw Fire Lord I in the shadows of the cave. The old man pretended to close his eyes in deep thought, but in reality, he wasn't asleep. "When I first heard your story in Byzantium, the bard said you were born speaking Chinese. I've witnessed how difficult it is for those Westerners to learn the language after entering my Eastern tang. I never thought their words would be true. You could actually understand my words from the air." The cave they were staying in was not spacious, and despite the snoring all around, the two men couldn't tell if the rest of the group was asleep. In such a situation, using Chinese, which only the two of them could understand, acted like a coded language, a perfect way to exchange hidden messages. "Your story may fool them, but not me. No one could leap 60 meters in such strong winds, unless you're a Taoist swordsman. And the bridge's cables can't be that new. We must have received additional assistance." "King Loki, my guess is correct." Fire Third Master's face flickered in the firelight, leaving Loki at a loss for words. This journey was too smooth. First, all the sand bandits died inexplicably in a secret room in an abandoned village, and then the wild animals along the way disappeared en masse. Tonight they were trapped in the middle of the quicksand river, and a stranger even threw a chain for them from the other side of the river. If my guess is correct, someone is helping us in secret, but the person they are helping is neither the bachelor nor the wealthy Byzantine businessman in the team. The ultimate goal of this mysterious person is very likely the girl from Eastland that you picked up on the road. Chapter 535, Scorpion Tribe. 3 days later, the sandstorms gradually subsided. The hash caravan didn't rush off, but instead rested within the cave for 3 full days. After 3 days, when the weather cleared again, the porters returned to the ferry crossing from the previous night and spent the entire morning collecting the chains and bridge planks before setting out again. On this route, they could lose their companions and their cargo, but they absolutely had to keep their essential survival supplies within reach. Chains, planks, and rivets were inexpensive and extremely heavy, but in a crucial moment, they could save lives. Last night in the cave, Loki and Hosanna had roughly deduced the source of their good fortune. It had the power to protect them through the desolate black desert like an invisible giant hand, a skill not often possessed by ordinary people. Could this be the Illuminati? Or some other organization? They cherished this East Continent girl so much that they feared the caravan would be killed by bandits, wild beasts, or suffer an accident while crossing the flowing sand river. Therefore, they did their utmost to help them advance smoothly. Loki didn't believe the Illuminati were necessarily helping them. The reason was simple. If they were Illuminati members, a direct abduction in Memphis would have been a better option. The rest of the journey was once again a leisurely sightseeing trip. After crossing the shifting sands, the deeper black desert became a vast, uninhabited area. The abandoned cities and villages so common in the outer sand seas were now extremely rare here. For 3 consecutive days, the Hashma caravan had camped in the abandoned caves of giant snakes. These caves weren't always empty. The inner black desert was a haven for ancient creatures. The scarcity of human habitation allowed many terrifying monsters that had survived from ancient times to choose to survive in this undisturbed land. After eons of existence, their bodies often grew immensely larger, and their combat prowess and experience far surpassed those of their younger counterparts. In previous years, when the caravans crossed the shifting sands, their primary enemies would shift from sand bandits to the beasts and monsters that plundered the caves. Packs of hyenas, vultures, and sand snakes and scorpions frequently roam the vast, uninhabited sand dunes. When encountering gregarious beasts, skilled caravan traders can often avoid combat by lighting torches or throwing poisonous smoke. Wild beasts aren't the most formidable. The most terrifying are the ancient monsters that have survived from ancient times. When humans sail to other continents, their vessels, along with crew and cargo, are likely to harbor fleas, ants, rats, and other unintended passengers lurking in the dark corners. When ocean-going ships dock at new lands, these creatures hidden within follow the crew, disembarking and entering this new land, becoming a new species. Meisters at the Citadel believe the same is true of the ancient monsters currently roaming the fringes of the continents. When the outer gods descended upon this planet, they followed in various ways. Since their arrival, due to lack of natural enemies, some monsters have even survived to this day. They hide in the corners of the world. Some have fallen into long slumber. Some sought opportunities to hunt the chosen and other monsters, harvesting the pure psychic energy. After crossing the shifting sands, the greatest threat to the caravan merchants shifted from sand bandits to the ancient monsters roaming the yellow sands. While the chance of encountering wandering monsters in this Mediterranean-like expanse was low, an encounter was almost certain death. In over 20 years of traversing the Black Desert, the Hash caravan had only encountered monsters twice. Once, they encountered a group of towering, rock-like giants traveling southward through the windswept sand. Another time, a massive rock, its size obscuring the sun, flew overhead at high speed. The strongest fighter in his group was Abdul Elshi, a fire knight on the path of the Cinder King 6. His relatively low sequence level meant his psychic energy concentration was low, and the ancient monsters simply disdained him. Consequently, the Hash caravan had never been attacked by monsters. Previously, when they had taken shelter in caves, they had to use fire and smoke to drive out the beasts. However, in recent days, every cave where Old Hash accustomed himself has been deserted. Not only are there no animals, but there's not even a trace of feces, fur, or other signs of animal habitation. After crossing the quicksand river, turning back is no longer an option. No matter what happens, the Hash caravan has no choice but to keep moving forward. Traversing the vast uninhabited area, the azure sky and the endless crimson yellow sand dunes are the only colors in sight. Having consumed a significant amount of food and water, the Hash caravan has dwindled to just 70 or so wagons. They form a long line across the empty sky, like a wisp of dust in the air. Crossing the uninhabited area is easy for Old Hash. There are no villages, no vegetation, and no mountains. The endless, shifting sand dunes, like waves, change beyond recognition every few hours. But Muhammad Hash possesses a unique ability to keep track of directions. Every night, he gazes up at the stars with a telescope. According to Hosseini's speculation, the merchant who introduced Old Hash to the trade was highly likely versed in the art of yin-yang astrology. This person was likely a registered disciple of a master from the yin-yang school. The art of using the stars to determine direction originated in the ancient Babylonian Empire of the Mesopotamian region. They connected the stars to form animal-like shapes to divide the sky overhead. This stargazing method, known as the zodiac, had a profound influence on later generations. The 12 zodiac animals of Eastern nations and the birth signs of the Greek city-states all evolved from the zodiac. However, locating by the stars is ultimately ambiguous and uncertain. Using it on long-distance voyages inevitably results in significant errors. Accurately locating a 5-meter diameter cave or a deeply buried well within a vast expanse of sand dunes is a skill only the yin-yang astrology of the yin-yang school can achieve. In the Eastern Tang dynasty, the extremely complex yin-yang astrology had been largely lost after the invention of the compass. However, it was unexpected that Old Hash had mastered this skill. In the Black Desert, where magnetic needles often radically shift, it was a treasure. Hosseini didn't question him too much about his secrets. Every businessman who built a fortune from scratch in these chaotic times had a unique story. Beyond this yin-yang astrology, the flaming cross he occasionally pulled from his bosom seemed to contain an extremely concentrated concentration of pyrokinetic energy. This man must have hidden even more secrets. Hash's caravan's progress was not rapid. After more than 10 days of slow progress, Old Hash, with precise leadership, emerged from the no-man's land. When desert plants began to reappear sporadically, he breathed a sigh of relief. He had discovered the traces of the scorpion herders at the edge of the no-man's land. After crossing the Quicksand River, the first freeman tribe on the caravan's route was the Scorpion tribe in the Langt Oasis. This group of devout believers, embracing an ancient faith, have guarded the tomb of the renowned ancient emperor, the Scorpion King, for generations. They firmly believe that the slumbering emperor will one day awaken. Then, he will lead the remaining tribesmen to drive out all invaders and regain control of this land. Chapter 536, Scorpion Tribe, 2. Hey, brothers, come on, the Langt Oasis is right before us. Once we enter, we'll be able to trade for a large quantity of goods, and there are also welcoming free folk girls waiting for us. Don't forget to drink a few drops of scorpion dew before you do anything. I guarantee you'll experience a thrill you've never felt before. 10 days later, as more and more scorpion herders appeared on both sides of the caravan, a long-lost smile returned to old Hash's aged face. Along the way, he showed great hospitality to the herders, clad in dark yellow silk. He unloaded the dried meat and fine wine from the wagons, and stuffed them into their hands, regardless of whether they needed it or not. Loki keenly noticed a problem. Most of these herders were elderly. They used a rather strange-looking insect-controlling stick. When they swung it back and forth, it made a sound of friction with the air. If they put their mouths to the end and blew hard, it could produce a variety of melodies, just like the ancient flute commonly used in the East continent. The scorpion herders used this stick to rub the air and guide the insect swarms before them. Oh my god. I never thought I'd see a living scorpion farmer. This is truly a miracle. The chatty scholar Hans Welsh couldn't contain his excitement. He tried several times to run closer to the scorpion colony, but was always pulled back by Mergwin. This is an ancient craft, for so long, confined to this desert. Did you see that? This old man is driving away not only so many poisonous scorpions, but also so many different species. My god, how does he do it? Throughout the journey, he enthusiastically explained the art of scorpion husbandry to the accompanying porters. Like the numerous beekeepers across the continents, scorpion herders' business practices are not much different. Beekeepers are mostly nomadic travelers who live on horseback. They need to track the flowering seasons in different states and transport their hives precisely to the flowers when they bloom. This way, the bees, like skilled chefs, can harvest nectar from various locations, ultimately fermenting it into delicious honey. Commerce determines supply and demand. As commerce grew, scorpion herders began breeding large numbers of the species needed by traveling merchants. Large venomous scorpions suitable for riding were gradually eliminated by traveling merchants due to the difficulties of transporting and training them. Merchants were in high demand for scorpions that could produce venom. The quality of the venom depended on two factors. 1. The harshness of the living environment. 2. The quality of the food consumed by the scorpions. Centuries of experience have shown that captive scorpion breeding is not feasible. If scorpions are given an overly comfortable living environment, they will divert excess energy to reproduction. The venom produced by scorpions is significantly inferior to that of wild scorpions in both yield and efficacy. To ensure venom quality, field scorpion herding became the only way to ensure venom quality. This required herders to be familiar with the surrounding herds and to be able to accurately predict the course of battle. If a large number of scorpions were lost in a battle with other beasts, even if the battle was ultimately victorious and the remaining scorpions, under immense pressure, were fully venomous, their low numbers would still reduce venom production. Similarly, the beasts fighting the scorpions were too weak. While the scorpions could certainly survive, their overly safe living environment would reduce the quality of their venom. That's why most of the scorpion herders we saw along the way were elderly. This is a craft that relies solely on experience, no easier than a groom raising a warhorse. After another 3 days of walking, with Hans nagging them with scientific explanations, the Hash caravan arrived at the entrance of the Langt Oasis. This was the first oasis the Hash caravan had encountered. From afar, dense emerald green forests surrounded a flat, sapphire-like lake. Dozens of exquisite pavilions made of yellow marble dotted the oasis, surrounding a massive step pyramid. This was the tomb of the Scorpion King. For all the tribesmen living in the Langt Oasis, the primary reason for their existence was to guard this pyramid, awaiting the Scorpion King's return. As the caravan slowly entered the oasis, the oppressive feeling of the massive pyramid grew stronger. As they approached the lake's edge, the scholars could already see the massive statue of the Scorpion King atop the pyramid. He was a burly, Viking-like desert freeman. He wielded a knife in his right hand and wore an exquisite scorpion armband on his left. The most striking feature was the enormous scorpion he rode. The statue atop the pyramid was clearly a one replica of a real person. The enormous scorpion the Scorpion King rode was estimated to be the size of a bull. Its two enormous claws were raised high, and the rounded stinger on its tail, nearly the thickness of a water jar, was an imposing sight. Every nation has a near-pathological devotion to its founding emperor, and the ancient Egyptians were no exception. The Scorpion King's family name was Menes. The Menes dynasty marked the first unified kingdom in ancient Egypt. Back then, the Black Desert wasn't the dense yellow sands it is today. 10,000 years ago, the abundant Nile River flooded annually, irrigating the land on either side and creating vast expanses of fertile, easily cultivated farmland. The human ancestors who survived the Great Flood drifted here and unexpectedly discovered that the land was extremely suitable for farming. After a long period of reproduction, division, and war, the Scorpion King, skilled in raising scorpions and using their venom to fight, defeated all opponents and unified his kingdom for the first time. Scholars have uncovered at least 7 or 8 different historical accounts regarding the subsequent events of his kingdom. This is unavoidable. It should be noted that by the time Nefertiti became pharaoh and ruled this desert, the Scorpion King had been dead for over 3,000 years. His reign over this desert region was so distant that even after the pharaohs worshipped foreign gods like the hidden Ammon and the sun god Horus, he was still worshipped in mortal form. Numerous legends surrounding him, a mixture of stories fabricated by bards and a degree of historical fact, have shrouded the kingdom during the Scorpion King's reign in mystery. No one can say for sure how long his reign lasted. Why are there no descendants of the Menes family to date? It's even possible that this ancient form has been lost to history. What's undeniable is his immense power. Scholars are almost certain this is the earliest true case of a mortal transforming into god. To this day, the Scorpion Temple still offers 4 distinct upgrade paths: scorpion breeding, combat, poisoning, and war scorpion riding. Chapter 537, Scorpion Tribe, 3. The caravan's convoy flowed through the gates of the Scorpion tribe like a silver stream. The free people's lives in the Black Desert were remarkably safe compared to the outside world. Unlike Memphis, bordering Mediterranean civilization, the free people's settlement deep in the Black Desert needed no army, not even walls. Desert animals also depended on this oasis. For millennia, the free people had discovered that leaving a gap in the oasis was far more effective than sealing off the water source with a wall. Without a water source, desperate creatures would attack the wooden walls built by the free people even more frantically, a completely counterproductive outcome. As the porters, laborers, and scholars, new to the desert, wandered around, marveling at the intricate architectural paintings of the desert dwellers, a hint of worry crossed the brows of Security Captain Abdul El-Sher. "Boss, did you notice anything?" "I know, don't tell anyone yet," Old Hash interrupted before Sir could finish. Anything Sir could spot would naturally escape his notice. He'd sensed something was afoot since he'd approached the Lankt Oasis. Where had all the young men of the Scorpion tribe gone? Why were only the old men left in this tribe? 21 years ago, Hash had the good fortune to witness a war between the free folk. The Anubis worshippers of the Mia Oasis and the Ammon worshippers of the Saltwater Basin engaged in a bloody war for the free folk's rule. The outbreak of the free folk war was a boon for caravan merchants like Old Hash. Over the months of the war, the prices of steel, cotton, medicine, and food soared tenfold to 20-fold. In their frenzy of killing, a few free folk even resorted to actions that violated their ancestral traditions. They delved into the tombs of their elders, retrieved ancient relics, and sold them to caravan merchants to secure capital to win the war. Before the outbreak of this war, Hash's caravan had remained largely inactive. Taking advantage of this lucrative opportunity, Old Hash hopped between the two factions, making 3 consecutive forays into the Black Desert within a year, earning over 6,000 gold dinars. This wealth enabled him to purchase a shop on Constantinople's busiest commercial street and gradually establish himself among the aristocracy. Profits are often directly linked to risk. Selling war supplies amidst the warring factions offered lucrative returns, but it was also a dangerous business. If the free folk discovered that he was supplying weapons to both factions, this double-dealing behavior would undoubtedly incur the ire of the high priests. Abdul Sher, a soldier by birth, had just entered the village when he couldn't help but recall the Great War 10 years prior. The free folk village during the war was exactly what they saw now. The young people had vanished in large numbers, leaving the streets deserted. Occasionally, a few faces peeked out from the windows and doors, either elderly or young children. "Brothersa, cheer up," Old Hash whispered. "Don't forget, back in Memphis, Batru said no caravan had successfully returned from the deep desert in the past 3 months. There have been so many strange things along the way that I'm feeling a bit numb now. Keep your eyes wide open, your ears pricked up. Don't let this yellow sand wipe you out." Along with a sense of crisis, a faint excitement rose within him, from nowhere. Though he wouldn't admit it. After all these years, he'd actually begun to enjoy this constant feeling of uncertainty. Most caravans cared only about the profit they could make from a journey. But for Old Hash, the immense thrill of successfully leading a team into the desert, identifying and solving problems, far outweighed the hundreds of gold coins. If he could be the first caravan to return from the Black Desert in 6 months, if he could sell all the goods he carried, the merchants in Memphis would worship him as a god, and they would spread his story back in Constantinople. Old Hash couldn't imagine how much his reputation within the business community would rise. Maybe he could even run for a seat in the Chamber of Commerce. Among the caravan merchants, Old Hash and So were probably the only ones who seemed particularly worried at this moment. In stark contrast were the porters and laborers in the group, as well as the Byzantine scholars. Their excitement stemmed from completely different perspectives. Within the academy, scholars could only study ancient civilizations through ancient scrolls, relics, and the oral traditions of a few freed slaves. As the scholars of the East Continent often say, book knowledge is shallow, true knowledge requires personal experience. To fully grasp one's research direction, field research is always the best way. Langt Oasis was the first freedmen's city the scholars entered on this journey. Even before entering the city, the presence of the scorpion herders had ignited a long-suppressed passion within them. As they reached the outskirts of the city and saw the pyramids silently standing by the river, they began to discuss what price they would offer to persuade the high priests to let them in for a look. This somewhat naive ideal was immediately met with merciless ridicule from the caravan members around them. The Pyramid of Menes is the tomb of the Scorpion King. The sole purpose of all residents of this oasis is to protect the pyramid and prevent outsiders from entering and destroying the Scorpion King's remains. For a sufficient payment of food, iron, and spices, the high priests allow them to trade. For a higher price, merchants can purchase their own people. For exceptionally high prices, they even allow them to sleep with their wives and concubines. But no matter the price, entering the Scorpion King's tomb is a definite possibility. After all, this founding emperor of the Menes family was the first established monarch to unify Upper and Lower Egypt. The free people of the Black Desert await the king's awakening from the underworld and return to his mortal body. Then, he will lead his people to reunite the desert and drive out all outsiders. In a sense, the Scorpion King represents the will of resistance deep within the free people's souls. No one is allowed to desecrate him. Chapter 538, Scorpion Tribe, 4. The caravan members entering the city were extremely excited. With even the most basic understanding of caravan merchants, it's easy to see that their lives are very similar to those of pirates. Every time a pirate sails out of port, no one knows whether they'll ever return to shore. Therefore, every pirate knows how to enjoy life while they can, spending every penny they have at every port. The seas are full of accidents. If someone dies before their money is all gone, it's a huge loss. The same goes for the caravan members. Traveling through the perilous Black Desert, each time they enter a city, the caravan boss advances a portion of their salary. While the amount isn't large, it's enough to give the caravan members a moment's joy upon entering. No boss hoards their gold until the end of the journey, as the average attrition rate for caravans on this route is around 50%. Of 10 people setting out from Alexandria, 6 are lucky to return. 5 is the norm. It's not uncommon for all to die in the desert. If someone dies on the return journey, it means that most of their efforts have been wasted. This outcome was unacceptable to most members. The caravan members were so excited to see the oasis, not only because they were about to receive some of the bounty, but more importantly because of the welcoming free women. They could satisfy their sexual needs here without spending any gold or silver. According to statistics compiled by Arab archons, the free people of the Black Desert were divided into 5 major tribes. The larger ones were the Anubis tribe, located in the Mia Oasis, and the Ammon tribe, located on the banks of the Salt River. The 5 tribes combined had a population of approximately 150,000 to 200,000. They lived across a vast sea of sand, comparable in size to the Mediterranean Sea. It's easy to see that this land was practically uninhabited. This sparse population posed many challenges for reproduction. Thousands of years ago, when the pharaohs still reigned, inbreeding was the preferred method of the royal family. While mating between individuals of the same race and surname could indeed produce extremely powerful individuals like Nefertiti and Ramses, it was admittedly a very rare occurrence. In the vast majority of cases, the offspring of inbreeding suffered severe intellectual and health deficiencies. The ancient Egyptian empire's rapid decline from world dominance to mediocrity, ultimately annihilated by Rome, was largely due to the pharaoh's constant gamble of inbreeding. Entering the Middle Ages, the thriving Mediterranean trade brought new ideas to this isolated land. Freemen were astonished to discover that mating with foreign caravan members resulted in offspring significantly superior in height, strength, and longevity compared to those born from within their own village. Driven by Darwinian principles, more and more freemen women chose to retain the offspring of caravan members, hoping for the fruition of their own semen. It's important to note that these women were not prostitutes in brothels. The vast majority were married and had families of their own. Even so, the desert's sparse population meant that most shared some common bloodline. A healthy and strong offspring was undoubtedly more important than a handful of green grass. Meanwhile, caravan members, long at the bottom of society, possessed neither gold nor a permanent home. Most of them were addicted to drugs and cigarettes to some degree, making them unattractive to any woman of good character. Their only alternative to sexual gratification, short of committing a crime, was the elderly prostitutes who lived in the slums, often unable to bathe for 3 months. To some extent, these porters, at the bottom of society, sought to enjoy a decent woman, and the Black Desert offered their only chance. The Scorpion tribe wasn't a bustling Memphis. The number of travelers entering and leaving the town rarely exceeded 1,000 year-round, resulting in no dedicated inns. The hash caravan's customary method was to distribute a certain amount of goods to their men before entering the city, leaving them to find overnight accommodations on their own. Most men, unless extremely unsightly or physically disabled, could find shelter in small groups. As for whether they could find a romantic encounter, that depended on their own skill. While most of the caravan members were blood-stained desperados, no one dared to mess around in the Scorpion tribe villages. In this village, even a dying old man has over 20 methods for vanishing without notice. Any resident near the oasis is an expert in poison. Shortly after arriving in the city, porters and laborers took sack after sack of grain and cloth from the scribe, Guger. The newlyweds followed the old man as they each headed into the city to find their campsite for the night. The scholars gathered and, after a brief discussion, decided to first search the Scorpion farm for ancient scrolls related to the Scorpion herders. As for Old Hashi and the core members of the caravan, their primary concern was selling the over 100 cartloads of goods. Therefore, they left their wagons at the only inn in Langt Oasis, trading 3 loads of golden cloth for a private stay. Heath Branch needed to reach the caravan's next destination, Mbia Oasis. He had no interest in the withered, dark-skinned freeman women, so he stayed behind with his guards to await them. Old Harsh, the security captain, and the caravan's account bookkeeper headed for the lakeside market. Loki, bored, scratched his head and decided to follow them. His memory was missing, and he couldn't be sure if he had ever entered this village before. Yet, somehow, every blade of grass, even the scattered buildings along the lakeside, gave him a sense of déjà vu. As if he had seen them somewhere before. Chapter 539, Scorpion Tribe, 5. Though small, the Scorpion tribe possessed a vital trading venue, the bazaar. The villagers raised scorpions and harvested their venom to create potions, beloved not only by the Mediterranean nobility but also by the Black Desert freemen. The magic essence crafted by poisoners of the path of the poisoner was a necessity. The 5 major temples inherited from the pharaohs offered over 20 different upgrade paths. Among the powers bestowed upon mortals by the ancient Egyptian gods, none could activate psychic healing, similar to that of holy bishop, priest or Celtic druid. When sick or injured, ancient Egyptian citizens relied solely on the magic essence crafted by poisoners. Using ancestral techniques, poisoners would extract venom from captive venomous creatures, combine it with naturally occurring desert plants, and hunted creatures and monsters from across the land. Using ancient techniques inherited from their ancestors, they crafted hundreds of different potions with diverse uses. Byzantine merchants called these potions, made primarily from scorpion venom, snake venom, and monster blood, magic essence. These potions were integral to the daily work of priests at various temples. For example, the Stygian priests required potions extracted by poison masters for mummification, embalming, blood drawing, and writing Hadesic scripts. The oracles of the Sphinx temple drank large quantities of scorpion venom to enter a meditative state and communicate with the spirits. Furthermore, the dozens of catalysts needed by the sun priests to craft the sunstone were almost all crafted by poison masters. For these reasons, while the Langta Oasis, home to the Scorpion tribe, was relatively small, its market was quite large. Seeing the disappearance of birds and animals along the way, Old Hash's greatest fear was the unknown calamity lurking deep in the desert. After a difficult journey, they arrived at the Langta Oasis, only to discover a deserted ghost town. All the freedmen had perished, and their laboriously transported goods were worthless. This was every caravan's worst nightmare. As they approached the oasis and spotted the scorpion herders, his heart instantly relaxed. As long as people remained in the Langta Oasis, the market would remain open. As long as he could enter the market and sell the caravan's goods in exchange for various scorpion venom potions from the poison masters, his journey would be worthwhile. Entering the market, though still sparsely populated, the market was still operating. Entering the shop, Old Hash breathed a sigh of relief. Every merchant had a dedicated shop where he stocked his wares. The one Old Hash frequented was tucked away in a shed at the back of the market. It had no sign and wasn't very large. Through careful observation, Old Hash noticed that many freedmen preferred this shop to stock their wares, so he tried to blend in and interact with this poison master who wasn't quite a merchant. After lifting the curtain and entering the shop, it was empty. A vast wooden shelf was densely packed with bottles and jars of all kinds. Among them, the various colored potions shone with their own unique brilliance. Old Hash instructed his companions to put down their wooden boxes. Inside, there were exquisite glassware. Since becoming acquainted with the owner, 70% of the glassware in the shop has been shipped from Constantinople by his caravan. The old freeman who ran the shop looked almost identical to Muhammad Hash beside him. The Egyptians of northern Africa were not the coal-black, pure-blooded Negroids of southern Africa. The purest Egyptians possessed a pale golden complexion. For this reason, the kingdom's nobles and high priests customarily wore garments inlaid with the gold thread. The old man standing before Loki must have been quite a well-known figure within the Langta Oasis. His clothing resembled a thick armor woven from fine metal filaments. 15 years ago, when Loki, Old Gore, and Amma delved into the bowels of Leviathan, it was by disassembling this woven metal garment that they were able to maintain a safe detonation distance. The shop owner was already quite old. He glanced at Loki's pale face with his slightly dimmed eyes. Within his eye sockets, a strange, vertical pupil, like that of a snake, jutted out. Your Majesty, do not panic. All the magic essences in this shop are personally forged by the owner, Akhenaten. Most of the spiritual energy absorbed by the wild poisons is condensed into the poison, constantly devouring the free toxins in the air day and night. Mortal bodies are somewhat different from ours. With Old Hash, his translator, by his side, Loki approached and discreetly inquired if the owner had seen him before. Akhenaten blinked with strange, vertical pupils, met his gaze, and finally shook his head slightly. Loki was not discouraged by the fact that he had not been able to extract any clues about his whereabouts from the owner. This oasis was home to at least 10,000 free people, and the vague sense of familiarity in his mind made him almost certain that he had been here before. Without wasting any more time, Loki turned to leave, but before he did, Old Hash gently pulled him aside, pressed 2 unassuming potion bottles into his hands, and whispered something in his ear. Loki narrowed his eyes and nodded gently. Old Hash's facial expression remained unchanged throughout this process. Seeing Loki leave, he opened his arms and gave his old friend a big hug. Brother Hash, you have no idea how happy I am to see your withered face again. Akhenaten's voice was hoarse and metallic. This, too, stemmed from his tireless work of brewing animal poison day and night. The toxin evaporated into the air, then was inhaled through his nose and throat. This was how the poisoners at the Scorpion Temple raised their sequence levels while refining demonic essence. Look at the merchandise behind me, and you'll see it's been ages since I last saw a caravan from Memphis. Let me think, the last time I saw a black mule was 8 months ago, when frost fell from the sky. Black mule was the unique name given to the caravan merchants by the free folk. The name originated from the Arab habit of wrapping themselves in black robes. On the other hand, in the eyes of the free folk, they were as foolish as mules and horses. No matter how many of their kind are buried in the desert, there will inevitably be more people who will follow in their footsteps and continue to die. It is said that this group of people came here to die, just to earn more money to buy food or increase their land. The vast majority of free people could not understand this behavior. No matter how noble the nobles are, they only eat 3 meals a day and live in a 10-foot bedroom. If they really wanted these things, there are uninhabited vacant lands everywhere in the oases. They would just cut down trees and build houses. Why risk their lives on such a life-threatening thing? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 540, Scorpion Tribe, 6. Opening a shop in the Langt Oasis was undoubtedly inferior to shipping goods to Memphis and trading directly with major guilds. This simple principle was readily understood by the 60-year-old Akhenaten. However, there was an unavoidable danger inherent in this journey. The magic essence refined by poison masters was the purest psychic essence in the universe. Even sealed in glass, the psychic aura it exuded was a deadly attraction to the ancient monsters lingering in the Black Desert. If it were just monsters, it would be fine, but if it awakened a dormant ancient god, the prospect would be catastrophic. For this reason, young villagers from the Scorpion tribe dared only carry a few bottles when entering Memphis to purchase necessities. Carrying more would greatly increase the risk of attack. Only these reckless horse caravans dared to carry large quantities of magic essence across the desert. "Brother, can you tell me where all the young people in the village have gone?" Old Hash, no longer shying away, addressed his question directly. "Haha, what else could it be? There's only one way to quickly depopulate a population: wage war." Again, no, Akhenaten shook his head slightly. He stood up, pulled a tray of fine porcelain from under the table, and tossed a handful of tea leaves into the teapot. High Priest Ament has been continuously mobilizing large numbers of our men in recent years. In the past few months, he's transferred almost all the young and able-bodied laborers in the village to the Mia Oasis. It's said that the invaders this time are those blacks from south of the desert. Hearing this, Old Hash's brow furrowed. After such a long stalemate, it was clear to anyone with a discerning eye that the Arab Empire, with nearly the largest territory in the world, had given up on pursuing the free people of the desert. True, they didn't obey the governor's rule. But what good would killing them all do? The empire's only reward was a desolate desert, desolate beyond human eyes. Meanwhile, all the scarce goods produced by temple priests and the freedmen would vanish forever. Many dignitaries, not just in Constantinople but also in Changan and the holy city of Jerusalem, relied heavily on their goods. Consequently, the freedmen and their Arab rulers had reached a fragile equilibrium. As long as they refrained from excessive behavior, the army would turn a blind eye to their presence. Continuing a holy war to expel heretics at the cost of everything they had would benefit no one. Under these circumstances, Memphis, once a front line of war, gradually became a stable rear base for the freedmen. Their most frequent enemies, however, became the cultists of the evil god who appeared and disappeared from across the Black Desert. The area south of the Black Desert has long been shrouded in mystery for Mediterranean residents. Ancient texts reveal that thousands of years ago, the banks of the Nile were covered with vast fields teeming with water and grass. This mighty river not only nourished the people on both sides, but also served as a thoroughfare connecting north and south. The coal-black, dark-skinned indigenous people south of the Black Desert could easily have followed the river northward, entering the Kingdom of Egypt or even seeking a new life near the Mediterranean. However, in recent centuries, the ancient Egyptian empire has been on the verge of decline. A lack of sufficient population has led to the rapid disappearance of the fields and forests along the Nile. By 810 AD, much of the riverbed had become a drier riverbed. Without this crucial route for travel, the dark-skinned indigenous people south of the Black Desert were forced to cross the vast desert to reach north. Over time, the dark-skinned indigenous peoples of this era have all but disappeared. With travel completely cut off from north and south, no one knows the exact identity of the people south of the Black Desert, their population, and the number of kingdoms they were divided into. The only people who could interact with this group were the freedmen who lived in seclusion in the desert. Generally, The freedmen were reluctant to mention the black people who roamed the desert's edge. But Old Hash knew. During several psychedelic conversations after imbibing scorpion venom, he had vaguely heard the old poison master mention that the vast grasslands and primeval jungles south of the Black Desert were densely populated by terrifying evil gods that had survived from ancient times. The chosen ones of the temples of Anubis and Ammon often captured their hunters in the southern desert. Through torture, the free people discovered that these black-skinned pagans had no culture, no written language, even their language was extremely simple. Yet, the divine power they could wield was truly diverse. The free people often called these pitch-black fellows mad sorcerers. Compared to the civilized societies established across the Mediterranean, the East-West Continental Bridge, and the Eastern Tang Dynasty, their living conditions were not much different from those of humanity's ancestors who had just survived the Great Flood thousands of years ago. Mortals, ignorant and blindly believing, were easily seduced by the evil gods. That land held only chaos and darkness. Brother Akhenaten, did you see those invaders with your own eyes? The freeman blinked his pupils and shook his head slightly. Old Hash narrowed his eyes, lost in thought. Everything before him reminded him of the red dirt and black leaves in Loki's pocket when he first found him. It was a pity. Loki had lost all his memories. Otherwise, he would have known exactly what had happened on this continent. My old friend, I heard you brought quite a bit of cargo this time. Old Hash nodded. If you plan to continue south, you might want to visit our high priests first. The Great Pyramid holds the final batch of young men destined for the Mia Oasis. These are the last children of our tribe. According to the messenger, the number of black men entering the desert this time is enormous, and they seem to possess some hidden secret. If he asks, just say you heard it from me. I, Akhenaten, can guarantee with my life that you are a friend of my scorpion tribe. You will surely lead our people safely to the Mia Oasis. Helping the free people to send people is a task that neither pays nor wastes food, but no caravan merchants walking on this route will refuse. Because this is a rare way to directly contact the high-level priests. In this desert, the high-level priests are the emperors who control one side. Any resources that slip out from between their fingers can make the caravan a fortune. Patting his old friend's shoulder vigorously, Old Hash took out a bag of exquisitely packaged chocolates from his arms. This magical candy from the southern continent is an extremely valuable luxury even in the Byzantine Empire. Every time he walked on this route, he would buy a bag for his friends. Money is fleeting. Subordinates may die one day. In Constantinople, the merchants are harmonious on the surface, but which one of them does not wear a mask to meet people all day long? In a sense, this group of simple friends living deep in the desert are the most precious wealth he has accumulated over the years. Chapter 541, Legalist Assassins in Action. At the same time, at the Fanchuan, Heath Blanche removed the robe he had worn for over 10 days and retrieved the 2 steel forks he had placed close to his ribs. Even in the eastern continent, most people had never seen such a unique weapon as the trident, but Heath was surprisingly adept at wielding it. The trident could pierce the enemy like a dagger, while also using the gaps between the 3 prongs to block and deflect incoming weapons. While engaging the enemy, he felt a uniquely exhilarating sensation, akin to the Visigothic bullfight. Before changing, Heath had enjoyed a comfortable cold shower in a bathhouse near the oasis. The cool oasis water washed away the heat. By the time he emerged from his room, dusk had already fallen on the Lanked Oasis. The Phagia action team had performed exceptionally well in their concealment throughout the journey. They had rigorously followed their instructor's training, each living within their own newly created identities and not appearing overly unfamiliar with others. At the same time, they didn't deliberately make any friends. For a lurker carrying out a secret mission, maintaining this balance of appearing close, yet not being too close is essential. Whether with enemies or friends, they could easily attract excessive conversation and unwanted stares. Before joining the Hash caravan, concubines who had established a strict silence policy. Even with their new identities as cover, they were still acting. While this might not seem like a big deal to others, it wouldn't necessarily keep a secret with a seasoned veteran like Old Hash. Furthermore, the caravan included 2 extremely powerful individuals, Fire Third Master and Loki. Throughout the journey, they barely exchanged glances, simply out of fear of being discovered. Their strict discipline paid off, ensuring no one harbored any suspicion. Upon entering the Land Oasis, home to the Scorpion Temple, the Misters, upon learning that they were unwilling to leave, even entrusted the mysterious girl they had brought with them to the care of Heath Brancher. Even Hosanai, a former member of the Overseer Corps, failed to detect any flaws. After changing into clean new clothes, Tankai, disguised as the captain of the Imperial Guards, also tidied his appearance. The two men carefully patrolled the hotel twice, ensuring that all members of the Hashma caravan had departed. Tankai had already arranged for his men to be stationed around the hotel. After double-checking that no members of the caravan were around, the two men approached the door to the women's quarters. As they approached, concubine Zhu, shrouded in a dark red veil, delicately opened the door and emerged. "There's no need to light a fire tonight. All the Arab servants accompanying the caravan have already left for the oasis. I've prepared food and drink for them. It's almost certain that we'll be unsupervised for a while, since their separation in Memphis, where they had been plotting how to infiltrate the Hashma caravan. This was the first time they had reunited without disguise. Their plan had been executed with remarkable success. Zufei's team had been lurking in Memphis, awaiting the arrival of the Crescent merchants. Unexpectedly, the Crescent merchants perished along with the Hangcheng, leaving them to face the fate of Muhammad Hash's caravan. Upon realizing that Loki, the king of Paris, was among the caravan, Zufei immediately halted her assault plan and sought another method to obtain the girl. It now appeared they had undoubtedly succeeded. Hash's caravan had unconditional faith in them, and the Donglu girl was now within their grasp. "Master Zhu, given the current situation, should we consider retreating?" Heath, casting aside his usual cynicism, was the first to voice his opinion. Born in the pirate-ridden Visigothic region, he had always yearned for the golden lands of the Tang dynasty. When he was captured by a powerful swordsman aboard an armed merchant ship and asked you if he was willing to serve the trusted ruler of the Tang Empire, he unhesitatingly joined the mysterious legalist school. Completing the school's mission and attaining a higher position became Heath's sole life goal. The girl is in our hands. It won't be difficult to find a guide to the Mia Oasis within the Langt Oasis. The Illuminati's mission is to bring the girl into the temple to meet with the Styx priest. Returning the girl to them will complete our initiation. I think from this stage on, we can act alone. Fewer people means fewer targets and fewer variables. There's always a faint, eerie smell that keeps stimulating me on this journey. If we set off immediately, we can reach the Mia Oasis in as little as 7 days, completing the mission as soon as possible and ensuring that Zhu Dian can join the Illuminati is our primary goal. I also agree that we should leave the Hash caravan tonight. After a moment's silence, Tankai, the oldest disguise artist among the group, echoed, "I underestimated the passion of these scholars for research." When Heath joined the caravan, he promised to bring a group of scholars to meet the Styx priest. If we continue to follow the caravan, it's still unknown how this matter will end when we really reach the Mia Oasis. Secondly, I have a feeling that Master Hosen, one of the scholars, is always observing us, whether intentionally or not. The fact that he was able to hand the girl over to us before entering the city suggests he hasn't yet become suspicious, but with all due respect, I don't think he's as simple as he appears. Concubine Zhu held her breath, her mind still racing. After expressing their opinions, Heath and Tankai and I realized that this was all they could do. The legalist school had a strict class system. Regardless of their experience and knowledge, subordinates could only offer opinions and not participate in decision-making. If we leave the group now, the 5 of us can travel light, and the journey that would normally take 14 days can be completed in 7. This saves time and avoids the presence of numerous watchers within the caravan. Both speed and safety are guaranteed. On the other hand, this action would also signal to the Hashma caravan that we are extremely dangerous. Once we enter the Mia Oasis, we only have 7 days to complete our mission. Once we've passed 7 days, the Hashma caravan will be immediately exposed upon entering the city. By then, Concubine Zhu shook her head gently. But is staying with the caravan guaranteed to be safe? The girl will be under the care of the scholars for a long time, and the target will be out of their hands. This presents a significant risk. They don't understand the girl's preciousness, and what if something unexpected happens during the subsequent journey? Concubine Zhu pinched her brows and closed her eyes again. She activated the Ice Heart technique, one of the training techniques of the legalist assassins. This mental technique allows them to maintain composure at all times, preventing the mental fatigue caused by rising blood temperature. At that moment, a few faint rings reached their ears. The inn was guarded on all sides. Anyone who could push through the guards and open the door must be a member of the Hash Horse caravan. Heath peeked out the window and saw a tall, thin Arab servant approaching the inn. Heath and Tangkai knew they couldn't stay any longer. They opened the door and quickly left with light but swift steps. Concubine Zhu and Lu Mei, who was beside her, once again donned dark veils and knelt respectfully in a corner of the room. Their roles within the Hash Horse caravan were prostitutes preparing for a ghost marriage ceremony. In the eyes of ordinary merchants, even the most high-end prostitutes were still menial. Once inside the inn, Old Hash arranged for them to live with the caravan's laundry and cooking maids, 7 or 8 women sharing the same roof. When the other maids returned, they had to quickly adapt to their roles. The sky was gradually darkening, and the twilight cast a gloomy blue over the entire inn room. Concubine Zhu could hear the slow approach of footsteps in the corridor. When the figure, shrouded in a pitch-black robe, appeared in the room, she cracked her eyes open and instinctively grasped the 2 thin knives held close to her arms. The Hash Horse caravan included 6 maids, responsible for washing, cooking, and feeding the horses. Including the 2 brought in by Heath Brancher, the woman numbered 8. It was clear that the tall, slender woman who had just entered the room was not one of them. Despite this, Concubine Zhu merely prepared for battle and did not engage. Her identity at this point was still that of a high-class prostitute from the Byzantine Empire, and she would not reveal her disguise unless absolutely necessary. Perhaps, this was just a freeman taking advantage of the chaos to steal money, but how had she managed to get past their guards? The professional mercenaries Heath had hired in Memphis were certainly highly skilled. What was going on? Beneath her gray veil, she cautiously observed this unassuming guest. After entering the guest room, she didn't rummage around like a thief, but rather cautiously lit an oil lamp. Then, turning back to look at Concubine Zhu, she gave a rather hideous smile. The next moment, she flashed a snow-white hand and, without warning, slapped Lu Mei on the head. Despite being prepared for this mysterious figure's arrival, Lu Mei collapsed to the ground as soon as she raised her hands at such close range. Concubine Zhu was horrified. She had no idea who the newcomer was, but there was no doubt their disguise had been blown. Deftly drawing the thin knife from her arm, she transformed into a gray shadow and swiftly rushed towards the mysterious middle-aged servant. Just as she was about to close in, the servant suddenly spoke in perfect Chinese. "We come from a primordial night." It was a code word etched deep in the memory of every legalist assassin. Concubine Zhu instinctively replied, "In the night, there are no friends." Chapter 542, Legalist Assassins in Action, 2. Holding his breath, he sank his entire body into the stone beam. At this moment, Loki couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for Old Hash. Entering the Lanked Oasis, he followed Old Hash to the market. During their casual conversation, Old Hash inadvertently revealed his doubts about the identity of Heath Branch, the brothel owner. Old Hash had been in Constantinople for over 40 years. During this long period, he had met many Roman merchants. Frankly, aside from his somewhat unremarkable reaction to the corpse, Heath didn't betray any of his true colors. But the strange thing was precisely his normality. He looked so much like a Byzantine merchant. If scholars were compiling a dictionary and wanted to add an example after the term Byzantine merchant, Heath Branch of Hash's caravan would be the perfect choice. He embodied every aspect of the popular stereotype of the sophisticated Byzantine merchant. Rather than being a merchant, he resembled the actors portraying merchants in the Constantinople opera. But Old Hash was a man of meticulous observation. It was precisely this rare ability, combined with a deep-seated caution, that had allowed him to survive this perilous journey. The most averse people he had encountered in his life were merchants of all stripes. Real merchants often had many faces. Some were lustful, some timid, some married but secretly attracted to other men, and some were overweight but still loved food. They were all merchants by profession, but in the real world, true merchants often sought to shed that label. They might seek to resemble a noble or a commoner. All this was done to give their target audience the impression that this person isn't out to make money from me, they're just my friend. Heath appeared easygoing, but for over 20 days with the caravan, he maintained a constant distance from everyone. In the settlement, he would give the porters precious cigarettes but would never sit with them. Seeing the servants struggling with laundry and cooking, he would order his men to help, but they always worked in their own way. Since leaving Memphis, Old Hash had spent the past 20 days in a state of intense anxiety. Anxiety often leads people to scrutinize everything around them, and when they observe everyone with a magnifying glass, they inevitably discover more flaws. After the battle with the Crescent Merchant Guild, Loki had completely earned Old Hash's trust. Upon entering the Scorpion tribe, When he heard the youth brancher say he would lead his men to guard the inn, he took notice, intending to secretly investigate the origins of these individuals. Normally, this task would have been assigned to Abdul LSH, the caravan's security captain. However, considering that if they were a group of high-ranking chosen ones disguised as merchants, so might not be a match for them. Ultimately, he decided to hand the task over to Loki, to see how they behaved when left unattended. Honestly, Loki hadn't noticed anything suspicious along the way. In his previous life, he had been a well-behaved office worker, living a dull, routine life. In this life, his men were all Viking warriors, wielding axes and engaging in bloody battles. His interactions with high-ranking merchants were limited. Out of an instinctive fear of effeminate men, he subconsciously kept his distance from Heath. He'd casually agreed to a job, but unexpectedly, lurking in the rafters yielded a remarkable reward. In Akhenaten's magic essence shop, Old Hash thrust a bottle of wolfsbane magic essence into Loki's hands. The desert jackals possessed a unique ability to conceal themselves, stemming from the elemental power hidden in their blood. The magic essence created by poison masters using jackal blood could greatly suppress the temperature and psychic fluctuations emitted by the human body. After applying the magic essence all over his body, as long as Loki held his breath, no one could detect his whereabouts. Hiding in the rafters, he could appear like a solid rock, without breath and without warmth. Miss Zhu Fei, please rest assured. Your friend is merely unconscious, I haven't harmed her life. In the room below, in stark contrast to the calm maid, concubine Zhu remained tense. In a flash, she sprinted towards the slender servant like a cat with its fur standing on end, raising her thin blade to pierce her neck. Without flinching, the man recited a secret code known only to the masters of the legalist school. His composure alone surpassed all her previous opponents. Slowly lowering her raised arm, she first reached out to check Green Eyebrow's breath. After confirming she was still breathing, she sheathed her blades and bowed respectfully to the mysterious figure. Secret societies often operated in the shadows of great power rivalries during the Middle Ages. Of all these secret societies, the Zoroastrianism, with its temples and recruiting followers, was the most high-profile. The Illuminati could have remained in the shadows for a long time, but Loki's sudden appearance exposed these lizard men in human skin to the world. As the attention of all the rulers was drawn to them, no one noticed that the legalist school, long hidden in the shadows of the Confucian scholars, had secretly expanded to such a scale. In a sense, the legalist school was the most successful secret society of the Middle Ages. Before their rise to power, they had been operating in obscurity for centuries. Legalist members were hidden in the corners of every continent, so much so that even the depths of the desolate Black Desert could boast a mentor-level lurker. With her immense self-confidence, elusive demeanor, and a strange face amidst the gloomy twilight and flickering candlelight, this individual's actions perfectly matched concubine Zhu's concept of a legalist mentor. Judging by the commands she uttered, her rank within the school far surpassed concubine Zhu's. After sheathing her blades, concubine Zhu knelt before the maid, reminiscent of her first meeting with her mentor at the Assassin's Academy nestled deep in the mountains. There are rumors within the school about your abilities, and seeing them today, they're not false. It seems all the arrangements I've made for you along the way have been largely for nothing. With these words, concubine Zhu immediately understood the mentor she was referring to. According to the original plan within the legalist school, after the Crescent Moon merchants defeated the Hangchen, Zhu Fei's team's next move was to follow the Crescent Moon merchants into the desert, slaughter all Crescent Moon merchants before reaching the Langed Oasis, and then seek a guide to complete the final journey. Loki's appearance among the Hashma gang disrupted all these plans. With the Hashma gang ultimately victorious, Zhu Fei's team in Memphis suddenly changed their formation, and the legalist mentors, observing the situation from behind, also quickly changed their strategy. The maid reached into her bosom and pulled out a thin piece of paper made of wood pulp. It was blank. I will orally dictate some of the next phase of the mission assigned by the higher-ups, while others are beyond my purview and must be reviewed in person by you. The school requires you to continue the Illuminati initiation ritual and transport the East Continent girls to the Mia Oasis. Meanwhile, the Right Prime Minister requires you to remain undercover within the Hashma gang. After internal deliberation, the school has determined that Loki Sterrig, the King of Paris, can also be part of this mission. We have secretly deployed the legalist disciples lurking in the Mia Oasis to meet you and complete the next phase of the operation. Concubine Zhu nodded. The school maintains a strict hierarchy. To maintain the smooth functioning of the secret society, All must unconditionally obey the orders of their superiors. While she is the leader of her own team, she must be a pawn in the presence of her mentor. The final step in the mission is to enter the Temple of Anubis. I need you to follow the Styx priest into the temple. Don't hesitate during this part. If the Styx priest asks you to hand the girl over to him, don't refuse. The right Prime Minister has instructed me to assure you that the Styx priest we're meeting is one of ours. What are his facial features? Concubine Zhu asked. It was a simple question, yet the legalist instructor across from Concubine Zhu remained silent for a long moment. The Academy has never arranged for us to meet, so the official statement is that I haven't seen the Styx priest's face. However, I also have my own secret agents. The right Prime Minister has been arranging my entry into this desert for so long, and I have a feeling it was all planned for your arrival today. The Academy is taking this operation very seriously, so seriously that it's even been deliberately downplayed. The instructor sighed slightly, her voice bleak. By this point, Concubine Zhu was completely certain that this person was no black desert freeman. Beneath this facade, she was likely a native of the East continent. The Styx priestess you're meeting has a very striking characteristic. Wherever she goes, she carries a large, ancient-looking axe on her back. Her name is Sophie Sterrig. Chapter 543, Legalist Assassins in Action, 3. Loki had never imagined that the first news he'd hear about himself in this desert would come from the rafters of an oasis inn. Even he couldn't keep his composure, as if he were listening to a story. My guess was correct. My entry into the desert must be related to Sophie. From what this mysterious person has said, Sophie must have been here for quite some time, even holding the position of Styx priestess. The question then becomes, is this Sophie herself, or is she still controlled by Nefertiti? Did this 1,000-year-old bastard finally obtain the body she longed for? Loki couldn't answer any of these crucial questions. The sudden appearance of his eldest daughter's name made his composure unbearable. Loki could feel his heart beating rapidly, and he tried his best to suppress it. But the raging blood of his ancestors was ignited bit by bit. No, after all, the blood flowing through me is the burning, boiling blood of Olaf the Conqueror. This blood is like fire. Once ignited, it cannot be extinguished by subjective will. Now I just hope their meeting ends quickly. The wolfsbane spirit can suppress a mortal's aura to a certain extent, but it can't transform him into true rock. Loki held his breath and concentrated, hoping to gain more information. A brief silence fell beneath the beams. Then, Zhu Fei looked at her mentor and whispered, "Have I been exposed?" The Illuminati has a very meticulous initiation process for outside members. It's clear that the legalist school is definitely not the first to engage in this insertion practice. According to intelligence provided by her superiors, the person who guided Zhu Fei into the Illuminati was a legalist spy already lurking within the organization. However, from her first encounter with the Illuminati's followers at headquarters, she instinctively knew that everyone was prepared for her arrival. Not only the legalist mentor who had introduced her to the order, but also every Illuminati member before her, looked at her with eyes like a dead fish on a chopping board. Steadfast, cruel, and completely without question. Did you discover it? Given your overwhelming resume, it's not surprising you could see through this situation. Thousands of years ago, the military strategist Sun Tzu wrote in his military treatise, "Strike the enemy with strength when weak, and strike the enemy with weakness when strong." Letting our enemies believe they have everything under control and treat us as fools is also part of the plan. As these words rang out, Concubine Zhu's eyes flashed with a cold gleam. The strange things that had befallen the caravan since leaving Memphis were due to the school's covert protection. She knew the magnitude of this mission. But the right Prime Minister had placed such a heavy burden on her. Her true identity was known within the Illuminati. Given the legalist school's unwavering style, other legalist believers lurking within the Illuminati would likely also have to reveal their identities. For Concubine Zhu to join the organization, countless people had paid a heavy price in the dark, perhaps even their lives. Imagine the leader of the Illuminati. Now, two followers stood before him. One said, "I recommend an assassin from the legalist school to the organization. She loves Confucianism and hates the legalists, who treat people like animals. Therefore, she wants to leave the legalists and join us. I think this is a great opportunity. She could be the nail in the coffin." The other replied, "I'm from the legalist school. My former school asked me to recommend a follower to our organization. I don't trust her. The legalists are a bunch of reckless lunatics, but I think we can trick her into joining us, exploit her, and then follow the clues to uncover their true intentions." In terms of information and credibility, The latter is several levels higher than the former. Looking at the blank sheet of paper in her hand, concubine Zhu finally understood that all the mentor's early preparations were to use her as bait. The entire initiation operation was a sham. The Illuminati knew it, and so did the legalist mentors. It wasn't until she entered the Langed Oasis that the mysterious mentor presented her with her true mission. When she heard that one part of the mission involved Sophie, the only daughter of Loki Sterg, and thought about the amnesia king of Paris who had once killed the Illuminati leader in public, everything clicked. After giving her the mission, the mentor extinguished the flames, and the room returned to darkness. Zhu Fei could see the mentor gently stand up in the pitch blackness and disappear into the darkness. A moment later, she relit the candle, and she was alone in the room. Reaching for the letter the mentor had given her, Zhu Fei held the thin piece of wood pulp paper close to the flames. As the flames burned, line after line of tiny handwriting began to appear on the blank paper. These words appeared for only a few seconds before the entire sheet was consumed by the flames. For the most confidential correspondence within the gang, the mentors only used this method to transmit it. This way, each letter would be read only once. The message in concubine Zhu's mind at this moment was personally delivered by Li Chunfeng, the leader of the legalist school and the right prime minister of the Tang dynasty. Apart from her, no other legalist disciples on this route knew what her next mission would be. Because no one else in the world could read a letter that had been incinerated by flames. Chapter 544 Cultural Barriers. 3 days later, Hash's caravan emerged from the Langed Oasis, home to the Scorpion tribe. The 3-day stay in the city was, of course, a way for the caravan members, suffering from the harsh sandstorms, to rest for a moment, enjoy fine food and wine, and have the opportunity to spend time with the women of the freedmen. It was also a way for old Hash to distribute the goods. This journey had brought him unprecedented prosperity. However, entering the desert and reaching the oasis did not guarantee a fortune. He needed to exchange the food, weapons, silk, cotton, and other supplies the caravan had brought for goods from the freedmen. Then, he had to transport this cargo from the desert to his shop in Constantinople, where it could be exchanged for gleaming gold coins. This process involved the question of how much to stock. The various magic essences crafted by the poison masters of the Scorpion tribe were popular in Constantinople, but transporting these bottles of liquid in glass was inherently risky. Cotton and silk were precious commodities in that era. After selling off all the goods, the entire caravan had only a few changes of clothing. Therefore, the caravans lacked any shock-absorbing materials. Caravan merchants often used wooden boxes made of nailed wood. These boxes might be fine for carrying potions on flat ground, but they would shatter with the slightest carelessness while crossing the dunes of the Black Desert. A few broken bottles of magic essence might only result in a loss of gold coins, but if the scent of the essence attracted dormant ancient monsters, the caravan would face grave trouble. After much deliberation, Old Hash sold only a third of the caravan's goods in Langed Oasis. This amounted to 4 carts full of various glassware, and as the horses moved, the clinking of glass could be heard from time to time. Less cargo often meant a shorter caravan, yet Hash's caravan still managed to leave Langed Oasis with over 100 carts. This was due to the addition of 30 or 40 fully armed freedmen to the caravan, most of whom were only 12 or 13 years old. What on earth has happened in this desert that they'd send these young men off to war? The scholar, the most indifferent to worldly matters, expressed his bewilderment. Entering the Langed Oasis, the Byzantine scholars stood in stark contrast to the cheerful porters. Their request to enter the Scorpion King's tomb was swiftly rejected by the high priests. Neither the chief scholar's letter of introduction nor the Byzantine Emperor Michael II's permit was effective. The Scorpion tribe had inhabited the Langed Oasis for generations, their sole purpose being to guard the Scorpion King's tomb. Whether they were the chief scholar or the Byzantine emperor, the high priests had no interest in knowing them. After an afternoon of persuasion, to no avail, the scholars returned in frustration just before the temple priests unleashed the scorpions to drive them away. Frustrated, they slept through the night, but the next day, their luck hadn't improved. They sought access to the Scorpion Ranch to investigate for ancient books on scorpion breeding, but were once again turned away. The freedmen and the inhabitants of the city-states surrounding the Mediterranean held diametrically opposed views on the concept of science. Information flowed rapidly between the nations connected by the Mediterranean shipping routes. With the rise of the citadel in recent years, merchants and ordinary citizens alike had witnessed a transformation of their lives through science. the status of Meisters soared, and by 810 AD, their status in many prosperous towns rivaled that of priests in the Holy Church. Meisters of any household simply knocked on the door, and upon seeing the Meisters insignia on their chests, residents were likely to grant their requests. But within the Scorpion tribe deep in the Black Desert, no one knew these Meisters. Their language didn't even have the word science. The Meisters, accompanied by several translators, engaged in a lengthy and gesticulating discussion. They first tried to convince the old man of the power of science by claiming, "Our research can help you increase scorpion venom production," but the illiterate freeman scoffed at the proposal. "Without the blessing of the Scorpion King, what do you know about raising scorpions? Why do I need you to teach me?" Seeing this plan fail, the Meisters offered another bait. "We have many ingenious gadgets that can significantly improve your quality of life." The Meisters presented the Citadel's recent inventions, including the sun corona, the compass, and the quill pen. The freeman shrugged off these trivialities. At the last moment, when the Meisters offered him silk and tea as bribes, the old man was completely convinced they were just thieves out to steal scorpions. He slammed the door shut and never opened it again. After a day of back and forth, the Meisters finally gave up. Of all the scholars, only Hans Wales, of noble birth, understood clearly that what was happening in the Black Desert was simply beyond their comprehension. This was due to the immense cognitive barriers between different cultures. As a child, a Celtic uprising in Wales County left a profound impression on him. When Hans Wales was 7 years old, a momentous event occurred in Wales County. While patrolling the territory, Hans's eldest brother, Charles Wales, stumbled upon a pregnant Celtic woman in a village. The woman was experiencing a difficult labor, and while the midwife waited helplessly for the Celtic druids to arrive, Charles, a holy bishop and priest of the Path of Holy Light, knew that the woman's situation necessitated no further delay. Charles, a lifelong believer in the Holy Light, saw his people in peril, and a single thought seized him: to save these two lives. Ignoring her husband's objections, he broke into the woman's home, cast a holy light spell to preserve her vital signs, and then single-handedly carried her to his horse. The pregnant woman's soul fire was too weak to survive, and to save her and her unborn child, he had to transport her to the nearest holy Episcopal church, bathe in holy water, and perform the subsequent delivery rituals. However, he hadn't anticipated how this would be perceived by the Celts. While Charles struggled to save the pregnant woman's life within the church, Celtic druids and a large number of armed villagers surrounded the church. They had no idea what ritual Charles was performing. They only knew he had stormed their village and abducted their people. A bloody battle erupted without warning, seemingly with both sides having reason to draw their weapons and engage in a bloody battle. A strange scene unfolded outside the village church. Inside, Prince Charles, under the Path of Holy Light, used all his strength to save the pregnant woman and child. Outside, scores of guards were bludgeoned to death by Celtic druids. Dozens of innocent lives were lost in just one morning. Was the pregnant woman's life ultimately saved? Not at all. The pregnant woman and child, whom Prince Charles risked his life to save, were hanged from a tree at the village entrance the day after returning. The reason was that she and her newborn were unclean. Rebirth with death was the most terrifying oracle in Celtic culture, which believed in the power of nature. Their souls must perish to appease nature's wrath. Chapter 545 Cultural Barriers, 2. This is their war. We'd better not interfere. Recalling his childhood, Hans reminded his leader, Mergwin Waldorf. Though both were nobles, there were significant differences in status within the nobility. Mergwin had grown up in the prosperous land of Constantinople, walking the pristine, breadstone streets, observing only the courteous Roman citizens. Hans was certain this trip would be the first time the noblewoman had ever seen such a large number of foreigners. Applying Byzantine aristocratic ideals to a foreign land, attempting to impose their own moral values on the activities of the indigenous people, Hans had witnessed firsthand, as a child, how his eldest brother's impulsiveness could ruin a good cause. Now, he must prevent Mergwin from doing the same. But I just had a brief conversation with him. This child is only 15, and he's filled with fear. He vaguely mentioned to me that no one who participated in this war ever returned alive. Mergwin's response caused two people in the caravan to involuntarily turn around and look. One was Loki, walking directly in front of him, and the other was concubine Zu, standing to the side. Their facial expressions were completely different. Concubine Zu still hid her face beneath a gray scarf, preventing anyone from observing. But Loki showed a hint of alarm. 3 days ago, He had used the wolfsbane magic essence given to him by Old Hash to hide in the rafters and eavesdrop on a remarkable piece of information. It turned out that Heath Brancher was not the leader of this group of Roman merchants. The person giving the orders in the legalist action team was one of the two prostitutes who had been so Loki along the way that no one even remembered their names. They were from the legalist school of thought that now controlled the Eastern Tang dynasty. The purpose of this operation was to infiltrate the Illuminati. It was obvious that they had a more important mission. It was for this reason that, when Old Hash returned to the inn late that night, Loki didn't confess what he had heard from the rafters. Admittedly, this group wasn't as simple as they appeared. However, their true purpose didn't conflict with Hash's caravan, and it was best for a mortal like Old Hash, who simply sought a peaceful life, to remain in the dark about their dangerous mission. Furthermore, Loki gained two other insights. After learning about his eldest daughter from the mysterious mentor, Loki recalled the pact he had made with Nefertiti in the solar vision. According to their agreement, when Sophie turned 18, he would accompany her into the city of the dead to search for the pharaoh's true body, which had been left there. If he kept his promise, Sophie would have turned 18 in 805 AD. By this time, it was already 810 AD. That night, he found Hans Welsh, a Welsh noble from New England, who confirmed his suspicions. Every Christmas, all high-ranking nobles of the Kingdom of Normandy must enter the royal city to meet the king. This king, naturally, is Loki himself. Hans Wales, with his title, naturally cannot meet the King of Paris. However, his father did mention on occasion that the former Lord of Wessex, Egbert, has been presiding over government in recent years. In other words, this wasn't his first time in the desert. He had most likely been wandering this desert for 5 years, so, it seems his journey with Sophie to find the city of the dead must have been difficult. Otherwise, why would she, 5 years later, become a Styx priestess secretly serving the legalist school, and I, after losing my memory, awakened in the middle of the desert? What have I experienced in these 5 years? At this juncture, any information could conceal the secret of his amnesia. Therefore, Mergwin's unconscious complaint successfully caught his attention. Loki had spent most of his life leading troops and engaging in battle. He knew wars, big and small, like the back of his hand. There's no war in this world with a 100% casualty rate. No matter how fierce the battle, there will always be a few survivors returning home. If what a young man on the carriage said was true, the battle ahead would be far from simple. Loki turned his horse. Most of the caravan understood the identity of this white man. They stepped aside, making way for him. "Young man, have you ever seen me before?" Mergwin translated his question. The young man looked at him in confusion, then shook his head in doubt. Second question, when did the Styx priests begin recruiting men from the Scorpion tribe? The young man frowned, pondering for a moment, then uttered a string of unfamiliar words. Mergwin heard it and translated, 5 years ago? 5 years? Why does this time frame sound so familiar? This mysterious girl from the East Continent seems to have been born only 5 years ago? According to the chronology, I should have been in this desert 5 years ago too. All these scattered clues seem to be starting to connect. Have those who have never left returned? No. Mergwin continued translating. A 100% casualty rate doesn't sound like a war in any way. If you force a comparison, it's more like a mass exodus of them to their deaths. The high-ranking priests of the Scorpion tribe are certainly not pushovers. The city's young people are leaving in droves, with no one returning, yet the city's rulers continue to condone this behavior. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't make sense. Unless the ruling class knows the truth behind all this. They know the answer, but they're deliberately hiding it. Knowing their men would all die, they still resolutely sent them on. This could very well be hiding a greater danger. Where does this danger come from? Where will it lead? His gaze returned to Mokwi, once again gazing at the girl from the East Continent sitting behind him. The answers to all the questions of this journey seemed to converge once again with this mysterious girl. He had a vague premonition that he would find answers at the caravan's destination, the Mia Oasis. His restlessness gradually dissipated, his mind cleared as the newly gained clues brought clarity. Loki looked at Mergwin and the group of Meesters behind him and said sternly, I want to inform all Meesters, once you enter the Oasis, do not wander around. While gaining knowledge is important, you must first ensure your own survival. When your sister followed me on my adventure to the far north, she achieved her current position precisely because she stayed by my side, never leaving my side from beginning to end. Once you enter the Mbia oasis, do not wander around. He was halfway through his words when, considering the Mr.'s frenzied energy along the way, even Loki felt the impossibility of doing so. Even if you must leave, travel in groups, and always stay within your companion's sight, the cold sense of crisis he once knew so well tightened around him again. At this moment, he finally understood that there was no such thing as coincidence. Waking up in the desert after amnesia, meeting Old Hash, and then fighting to rescue the girl from the East Continent, all of this was orchestrated. After leaving Memphis, Heath Brancher, along with the maids and guards around him, faithfully adhered to their required disguises. If he hadn't been hanging from the rafters like a corpse the previous night, he wouldn't have been able to see through the disguises worn by these Byzantine merchants. If such a strange thing was happening in the Mbia oasis, it seemed that even the Meesters joining the caravan was orchestrated by someone else. The chief Meesters saw the situation clearly and knew that the citadel would inevitably engage in a power struggle with the church in the future. They saw it clearly. How could the Holy Church, which had fought against various heretics and other churches for centuries and defeated all rivals to rise to the top, not see it? It certainly couldn't. Everyone knows the power of the Illuminati, but few realize that beneath the scorching sun, the Holy Church, with its tens of millions of followers, possesses equally immense power. The scholar's entry into the Black Desert is likely a tactical trap set against them. A legalist disciple disguised as a merchant, a scholar of ancient civilizations from the Byzantine Empire, a young girl from the East, and myself, who has lost my memory. This caravan seems to have been brought together by coincidence. But in reality, each is a prey in the eyes of a powerful entity. Chapter 546 Mbia Oasis. After departing from Langt Oasis, the Hashma caravan once again enjoyed a smooth journey. With the excellent guide Old Hash and the added support of over 30 freedmen from Langt Oasis, the group encountered neither sandstorms nor wild beasts. After 13 days of slow travel, the Hashma caravan reached their destination, Mbia Oasis, home to the Temple of Anubis, the largest tribe of freedmen in the Black Desert. This oasis lies in the center of a low-lying basin. From atop a mountain, one can see that the oasis is at least 4 to 5 times the size of Langt Oasis. Mbia Oasis boasts not just a single lake, but 4 flowing lakes of varying sizes. From a distance, a low lagoon can be seen in the center of the city, its currents forming a small waterfall. Simply approaching the oasis is a breath of moist air. The Anubis tribe is several times larger than the Scorpion tribe. In the center of the oasis, a human-shaped temple stands beside a tranquil lake. Side-by-side statues of Osiris, the god of the underworld, Anubis, the messenger of the underworld, and Amin, the heart-eater, formed the main structure. This was the legendary Temple of Anubis. Nearing the oasis, exquisite marble statues began to appear one after another along the descending path. The colorful murals and inscriptions clearly identified them as the high-ranking priests of the Temple of Anubis. The pale yellow marble sculptures, the intricate stone tablets, and the murals surrounding them signaled the city's prosperity even before entering the city gates. Descending the valley onto flat ground, as rows of sturdy breadstone pavement emerged, everyone felt as if they had returned to Constantinople. Nestled in the heart of the Black Desert, the Anubis tribe was a vastly underestimated city. In the early 21st century, with the discovery of oil, many barren lands in the Middle East began to rapidly accumulate wealth. In their eyes, the black oil extracted from the ground was no more than dirt. It was plentiful in the region. So too were the goods sought by Byzantine merchants in the Black Desert. As more and more caravans and merchants flocked to the Black Desert, the freedmen discovered that what they sought were mummies buried in the sandy tombs, along with the ancient artifacts buried with them. While ancient Egypt may have long since vanished, the pharaohs ruled this desert for 5,000 years. At its peak, ancient Egypt boasted millions of inhabitants and a vast array of foreign gods. With such a vast population and thousands of years of rule, the valleys surrounding several oases were filled with numerous aristocratic tombs. The tombs of the pharaohs and higher-ranking priests were intricately entombed with traps, and the freedmen dared not trespass. However, entering the tombs of ordinary nobles or large slave owners and retrieving a few burial objects was a simple task for them. Find any valley, basin, sand dune, or hidden oasis, and the tombs of the nobles are densely packed like anthills. Ever since the freedmen hid from the Roman magistrates, they have been excavating the tombs of their ancestors. Even after 800 years of digging, they have only uncovered a tiny fraction of what they have uncovered. Mediterranean merchants stereotyped the freedmen as dwelling in a desolate desert, enduring relentless sandstorms daily and surviving on a few saltwater wells and dried wild animal meat. However, upon actually entering this land and successfully reaching the freedmen's villages, each one discovered that their cities were more elaborate than many Mediterranean cities. Although a people of a fallen nation, they nonetheless boasted a glorious past, developing a civilization unmatched by most other nations. Needless to say, they also enjoyed the wealth accumulated by millions of their ancestors. Steps lead from the mountain's peak into the basin, and the main entrance to the Mia oasis stands at the city gate, formed by 6 obelisks. The pyramids are often considered the symbol of ancient Egyptian civilization. While the pyramids' imposing size may seem impressive, it is their obelisks that even more exemplify the ancient Egyptians' formidable architectural skills. These obelisks, standing 50 to 80 meters tall, are typically constructed from 6 or 7 finely cut marble blocks stacked on top of each other, and are inscribed with the city's history and the names of its rulers. Let alone marble weighing tens or hundreds of tons, even if 6 or 7 dice were dropped together, this fragile pillar would likely collapse under any external force. Several blocks of natural marble, carved into natural curves, stacked one on top of the other, then left in the uninhabited wilderness, exposed to the ravages of the wind. The fact that this architectural structure has endured for millennia without corrosion or collapse demonstrates a craftsmanship approaching the laws of nature. As soon as he entered the city gates, Old Hash felt that uneasy feeling of stabs in the back again. He had made this journey annually for over 40 years, and the Mia oasis was a must-stop on every desert journey. Located in the heart of the 5 major tribes, it was the largest gathering place for the freemen of the Black Desert. The city's permanent population exceeded 60,000, half the total freeman population. Every time he entered Mia oasis, the city would be packed with people, its streets thronged with traveling freemen and the carriages of nobles. However, this time, as they entered the city, under the scorching sun, a gentle breeze blew up the yellow sands in the city, leaving only a few figures scattered on the streets. As was often the case in the past, the freedmen's children should have gathered when the caravan entered the city. Old Hash's face sank as he gazed at the surrounding houses, dropping the candied fruit he was clutching tightly. The city wasn't completely deserted, but the few travelers on the streets appeared hurried. Wrapped in long robes, they vanished at a near trot on the fine sand and scorching wind. As for the other residents along the way, those who heard the caravan bells didn't peer out to observe, instead firmly closing their doors and windows. The stark contrast between the empty streets and the lavishly decorated city cast a pall of gloom over everyone's heart. Brothers, be careful. Once you enter the city, stay put. Everyone, stay put once you're inside the inn. I'll go to the market first and find out what's going on. Remember, don't wander around, especially don't leave the group. The Hash caravan chose a clear, cloudless day to enter the city. They advanced at an extremely slow pace, even pausing after passing several streets to allow guards to survey the area. After crossing 7 streets, the Hash caravan finally came into view of the massive outline of the Temple of Anubis. It was a massive structure built to depict 4 gods seated side by side. Amidst a faint, scorching sand, the mere sight of its immense outline was overwhelming. The temple gates were closed, and the square in front was deserted. Only 2 freedmen priests, cloaked in azure robes, stood in the center. Old Hash turned to look at Heath, who nodded gently. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 547 Mia Oasis, 2. Enveloped by a dark veil, concubine Zeus spotted 2 priests swathed in azure robes standing beneath the temple. Unsurprisingly, these were the Illuminati sent to escort them. Leaving the Eastern Tang dynasty and entering the Western continent, concubine Zeus' first stop was the ancient Roman capital of Rome. Within this ancient city, she met with Fitzroy, the Lord of Twilight, one of the Illuminati's 12 masters, and learned her mission to initiate the order. Now, the final piece of her quest lay before her. With a rather cryptic nod to Heath, the Visigothic agent immediately grasped her meaning. He effortlessly dismounted his horse and approached Old Hash with a smile that befitted a successful businessman. Brother Hash, thank you for taking care of us along the way. These 2 are the Styx priests who are supposed to meet me in Memphis. They will lead the 2 canaries into the city of the dead to complete the ghost marriage ritual. According to our promise, I need to find a way to lead the scholars into the city. When I go to meet them later, you might as well have the scholars stand behind me. I'll negotiate and do my best to fulfill their requests. Heath was a master of the art of conversation. The more determined one is, the more understated one should be. In Langt Oasis, he and Hankai and I had proposed to concubine Zu that while the girl was in their hands, they could take her and travel to Mia Oasis alone. That way, with the girl in their hands, they would have the initiative. However, concubine Zu unexpectedly rejected the proposal after meeting with a legalist mentor, forcing the legalist followers to remain with Hash's caravan. Retrieving the girl became a significant challenge. The girl from Donglu was only 5 years old. If it weren't for Donglu scholar Hosanna entering the oasis with other scholars for academic research, the girl would have been almost always by his side. Heath was somewhat wary of the methods of this former supervisory deacon. The supervisory corps were the ruthless law enforcers under the command of the legalist mentor. Within the school, they were considered low-level civil servants. With the rise of legalism status, their ranks often even surpassed those of the military police, who supervised the military. Despite Hosanna's scholarly robes and harmless appearance, the supervisory corps adhered to the principle of better to kill the wrong person than to let the guilty go. To have risen to the position of deacon, he must have been a ruthless character. If the girl were abducted, Heath's biggest concern was that he would execute her on the spot. For a legalist supervisor, this wouldn't be a burden. The Donglu girl was a hostage that concubine Zu had to carry with her on her mission. Any mention of it would undoubtedly alert Hosanna. Therefore, Heath Blanche said nothing about the girl. The caravan merchants showed no interest in her. The mysterious king of Paris clearly had no interest in this journey either. As long as the scholars followed the guidance of the Styx priest, they would most likely continue to carry the East Continent girl. Heath's guess was correct. The scholars endured the wind and sand all the way into the depths of the Black Desert, hoping to enter the mysterious city of the dead. Those who followed Hash's caravan into the Black Desert this time were all men dedicated to the pursuit of science. With their own abilities, it would have been easy for them to conduct research in the comfort of the Citadel's laboratories, but they braved the scorching heat and wind to come to this desolate place for their inner belief in science. Before old Hash could react, Mergwin had already led the scholars behind him, firmly standing behind Heath. This included Fire Third Master, and also the East Continent girl who had been sitting behind him all the way. Heath glanced at the scholars, nodded gently, and gestured for them to wait, then walked alone toward the center of the square. The two Stygian priests cautiously stopped about 200 meters from the Hashma caravan. By the time Heath reached them, his figure had already become a few curved streaks of light in the hot wind and yellow sand. Loki, look, old Hash frowned again, but Loki narrowed his eyes, interrupting his question. You are right, Brother Hash, this city is not safe. This place may seem deserted, but the Free People's various strange methods are inconceivable. Outdoors, we should remain silent and avoid excessive conversation. The scholars have chosen their own fate, and we have no power to change it. As for other matters, we will discuss them in detail once we find a quiet place to stay. In the distance, Heath's conversation with the Stygian priests did not last long. He turned and walked back to the Hashma caravan. Loki was the only one in the caravan who knew the true identity of Zufei's group. These madmen knew the Illuminati had set a massive trap for them, yet they plunged into it without hesitation. Frankly, for this reason alone, he greatly admired these reckless desperados. He couldn't save them. All he could do was keep their identities hidden. Brother Hash, our fate on this journey may end here. I will accompany the two Stygian priests on the rest of the journey. Only when we successfully deliver the two girls and the scholars to the city of the dead will my mission be complete. The high-ranking priests also mentioned that if your caravan includes adult warriors from the Langt Oasis, you might as well hand them over to me. I'll lead them into the temple, saving you from having to wait outside for so long. Old Hash was waiting for these words. If it weren't for maintaining good relations with the high-ranking priests of the Scorpion Temple, he wouldn't have brought over 30 mouths to feed in his caravan. Especially the 30-odd young men. Not to mention everything else, they'd consumed nearly an entire cartload of food during their 10-day journey. Furthermore, old Hash had entered the Black Desert solely in search of trade. Frequent contact with the free folk hadn't endeared them to him, but rather made him feel their danger. After leaving behind this burden, old Hash bid a final farewell to the meesters. I'll await your return at the Fayam Inn, west of the oasis. I'll brew strong liquor, and I'll share tales of the city of the dead upon your return. He whispered a final word before parting. Don't trust these old god worshippers, and don't overly trust that Byzantine merchant. If you sense something's amiss, flee immediately. Your group includes the Chosen One and the Eastland alchemist. If you can escape back to the Fayaumin, my men will defend you to the death. Mergwin nodded and followed Heath's group. With their departure, the Hash caravan finally returned to its former state. Everywhere he looked, he saw black clothes, black badges, and the iconic black beards. The next step was to exchange all the merchandise in the carriage for goods. In the past, this would usually be the most exciting moment of a journey. But now, Old Hash looked out at the empty streets, feeling no excitement at all. Chapter 548 Mbia Oasis, 3. The Hashma caravan continued its journey along the deserted city streets. A gentle breeze whipped up gusts of yellow sand, leaving the city practically perpetually shrouded in a thin blanket of dust. Visibility on the streets was limited to just over 200 meters. Beyond that, the scorching sun distorted the light like steam. The porters, who had been excited to see the vast and exquisite city transformed into its present state, fell silent. No one discussed which woman was fair-skinned and beautiful. Instead, they lined up tightly, vigilantly watching their surroundings while guarding the remaining cargo in the caravan. Boss, this isn't the first time this has happened. 5 years ago, I could already sense the city's population dwindling, but every time I asked, the high priest said it was due to the war with the dark, mad sorcerers of the southern plateau. This was the Hashma caravan's clerk. Like Abdul-Shir, this clerk, Gurja Rashid, was an indispensable member of the Hashma caravan. Rashid was born in Treacherous, a central point on the Silk Road. His mother was a Hu people and his father was an Arab. Growing up in Tang dynasty-run businesses, he not only honed his abacus skills, but also acquired fluent Tibetan and a limited knowledge of business-related Tang Chinese. Leveraging these skills, he successfully established himself within the Hash caravan. All the caravan's accounts, including purchases, shipments, and logistics, relied on Rashid's abacus. With his natural eye for detail, he had already noticed something unusual about the freemen of the Black Desert 5 years earlier. However, at that time, the decline in the freemen's population was not as pronounced as it is today. After navigating the desert sands, the joy of entering the city more than offset any minor concerns. Over the next 4 years, the prices of the freemen's goods in Constantinople skyrocketed. Old Hash, keenly aware of the potential danger, avoided entering the desert again for 4 years. This journey was driven by the outrageous prices of the freemen's goods and the demands of the Byzantine scholars. Old Hash knew the journey would be difficult, but he never expected it to turn out like this. After arduous journeys through the desert, they arrived at a deserted city, like a ghost town. If it weren't for the 2 Styx priests standing in front of the Temple of Anubis, he wouldn't have been sure whether the occasional figures moving through the yellow sand were real. With a sense of panic, Hash's caravan arrived at the Fayaumin, their usual accommodation. All familiar faces had vanished. The spacious ground-floor dining hall was empty, save for an elderly freeman man dozing at the bar. Old Hash always stopped here when he entered the Mbia Oasis. He was certain he had never seen this old man before. The dozing man had clearly not expected any guests today. Hearing the door open, he looked up and rubbed his eyes, making sure the group before him wasn't an illusion. Then he staggered to his feet. Merchants, if you wish to stay, please go upstairs. We have plenty of guest rooms, and you can choose whichever you prefer. I apologize for the shortage of manpower. The war in the south is intense, and all the young men have gone out to defend the city. I'm merely a night watchman. If you wish to eat, you'll have to use the kitchen fire to cook yourselves. The caravan stood in the inn's lobby, completely unprepared for such a scene. Old Hash casually wiped the long table beside him, noting a thick layer of dust. He recalled the advice the owner of the Sand Lake had given him in Memphis. Recently, if 3 out of 10 caravans returned safely, it's a good thing. The 3 that return are mostly blocked by the Quicksand River. Of all the caravans that have crossed the Quicksand River, none have ever returned to Memphis. Now it seemed the old innkeeper's words were not false. The disappearance of freedmen in Memphis was no longer surprising. The Mbia Oasis was still deserted. The travelers who once visited the oasis had vanished. They certainly wouldn't have gone all the way north across the desert. Where is the original owner of the Fayaumin, Bushimi Fayoum? I don't know if anyone who goes out to fight a mad sorcerer will return safely, the old man mechanically replied, slumped drowsily in his chair. Last month? No, it seemed like it was a month before last. I can't remember the exact time, The high priest came to my house and asked me to come and look after their shop. They gave me food, clothes, blankets, and other things. I couldn't refuse, so I came. If this brother hadn't mentioned it today, I wouldn't even have known the original owner of the inn was named Fayam. Boss, this old man has unsteady breathing and weak legs. He's just a frail mortal, not a warrior or a chosen one, so whispered in Hash's ear. The scattered members of the team have already left. I suggest we skip resting today and head straight to the market. Don't worry about anything we have, exchange it for anything. You go empty the wagons, and I'll restock the food and water. Tomorrow morning, you must leave this damned place before sunrise. This city is filled with strange things, so we'd better not linger even a minute. As for those scholars and Byzantine merchants, I'll stay here with 3 brothers and await their return. I'll still take the route from Bia Oasis to Langt Oasis. You can wait for us in Langt Oasis and meet up there. The 2 men chatted as they ascended the stairs to the inn's 2nd floor, finding a few rooms to stay in. Old Hash then recalled that when he'd arrived 5 years ago, this inn seemed to be deserted. Some of his men had even complained about cracks in the walls, letting in sand and dust at night. 2 openly gay men who preferred to live in the attic had already noticed 5 years ago that the attic was in disrepair and riddled with holes. Remember, this was the extremely wealthy Bia Oasis. How could an inn built specifically to accommodate foreign caravans and traveling merchants make such a mistake? The danger was right before my eyes. How could I have never noticed it? At this moment, Old Hash felt a true sense of limbo. The eerie city, the dilapidated inn, the deserted streets. He could feel every cell in his body warning him of danger. He had no problem abandoning Seath Branch, but he couldn't, morally or logically, abandon the Byzantine scholars. Especially not Mergarm Waldorf, of the Waldorf family. There's no such thing as a free lunch. I wanted to climb the rising citadel, but I never expected to have to endure this kind of test. Lord Cinder, I thank you for testing me. Drawing out an oil lamp and lighting it, Old Hash clasped his hands together and prayed devoutly to the flame. Time ticked by, and just before sunset, he opened his eyes. Loki appeared before him again. Chapter 549 Night Battle. Brother Hash, the old man downstairs has disappeared. These simple words immediately alerted Old Hash. He extinguished the sacred flame and sat up like a spring. When did this happen? I don't know. Loki shook his head gently. I went to the guest room, showered, and went to bed. When I woke up, I wanted to go to the kitchen to see if there was any food. No one's downstairs. Old Hash got up and went downstairs. As Loki had predicted, the bar was empty. The sun had gradually faded its last rays, and the sky and earth were shrouded in a deep twilight. Pushing open the inn door, the twilight stained the silent, deserted streets a deep blue purple. Every civilization has a custom of gathering before bedtime, but what was suspicious was that no fires were burning in the houses surrounding the inn. Loki nimbly leaped onto the rooftops and found that most of the wooden beams had cracked to varying degrees from the constant erosion of wind and sand. He casually opened a window and entered the room. What he saw was a nearly completely corroded bed and a thick layer of dust on the ground. My guess was right. These houses are deserted. This is a deserted ghost town. Loki turned and leaped back onto the street. The last rays of sunlight had completely faded from the horizon. No fire lit the streets, bringing back endless memories of his first entry into the sunken city 16 years ago. Picking up a piece of window frame, he returned to the inn lobby. He happened to meet Old Hash emerging from the courtyard. Our caravan is still here, it's just this city. Loki, his face grim, walked into the kitchen, found a piece of linen, wrapped it around the end of a stick, and then coated it with kerosene, creating a simple torch. Brother Hash, as much as I hate to admit it, I have to tell you, we've been caught in a conspiracy. The situation now doesn't allow us to delay any further. Tonight, all caravan brothers, block the doors and windows. Guard the inn's entrances and exits. No one should sleep, and no one should even think about going to the market to trade. This city is deserted. The figures we saw along the way in, the residents and the houses, were all a show put on for us by these freedmen. Loki's words were based on the house he had just jumped into. It had been uninhabited for a long time, yet the wooden wardrobes still held mostly rotten silk garments, and in the kitchen, there were sets of exquisite white porcelain. Porcelain jars and bowls, now ubiquitous in later generations, were truly high-end luxury goods in the medieval Western continent. For drinking and eating, the light, translucent porcelain was far more practical than gold. Many minor nobles, upon acquiring a set of these, would treasure them like heirlooms. No one, not even the freedmen of the Black Desert, would abandon such precious items in their escape. The Hashma caravan had looted the Hengchang and Crescent Moon chambers, seizing over 100 carriages, but they contained only a dozen or so pieces of porcelain. It's easy to imagine how much these goods would fetch in the desert. My king, where are you going? I need to confirm my suspicions one last time. Loki inserted the lit torch into the inn's main entrance and turned to leave. The other members of the Hash caravan, led by security captain Sa, immediately began preparing for battle. The Arab porters and laborers weren't professional guards, but entering such a bizarre city. Even if their minds were already dimmed by the effects of alcohol and prostitutes, they still felt a tremendous sense of crisis. Everyone, if you still want to leave this desert, brace yourself. Sa drew his saber from his waist, and the cold, murderous intent of a veteran instantly lowered the temperature around them. Everyone, take your swords. Use torches to light up all the surrounding streets. Porters, take out the kerosene and coal stored in the inn and spread them in the front yard. Servants traveling with a team, follow Boss Hash to the backyard to watch over the horses. We can lose men, but we'll lose goods, and some of our brothers might even die, but we can't lose these horses. Entering this desert is a life-threatening business. It is normal to encounter danger. We must work together to have a chance to return home. The 50 or so remaining caravan members sprang into action. Old Hash lacked the financial resources to maintain a permanent staff, so, like other caravan merchants, he hired personnel in Alexandria before each entry into the Black Desert. The greatest success for Old Hash and other caravan merchants over the years was due to the fact that once he had assembled his men, Abdul LSH would provide them with a 10-15-day training program, equipping all members with the most basic combat and transport skills. More importantly, he instilled in them absolute obedience. The porters and laborers who made a living in the port had heard the legend that the Hash caravan would return after entering the desert, and thus, this group of desperados and idlers obeyed his command. Despite the arduous training, the prospect of earning gold kept most of them unapologetic. At this juncture, all the pre-departure training finally came in handy. Like a well-oiled machine, the Hash caravan sprang into action the moment they received the order. As torch after torch lit up the streets surrounding the inn, the Faomen shone like a single, bright light in the dark, tomb-like city. Maids unloaded the goods, scattering them in the backyard. Eastern silk, tea, jade, and magnetic plates and bowls, once considered invaluable by the merchants, piled like garbage in the corners of the courtyard. Given the Hash caravan's current predicament, the supplies they had painstakingly transported into the Black Desert were now completely useless. If they had sought to collect these possessions, they could have easily found a treasure trove of gold, silver, and porcelain in any empty room. But what good could these possessions do? The horses and carriages were carefully led into the stables. After closing the doors, the black-clad maids drew their sabers, acting as the caravan's last line of defense, guarding the precious horses. Sa had 7 years of combat experience on the Eastern Front, where he and his cavalry had engaged in bloody battles against the skilled Turkic nomads. Sa possessed immense combat experience, and in just half an hour had everyone ready for battle. On the inn's roof, Old Hash once again pulled out a flaming cross hanging from his chest, placing it in his palm to feel its scorching heat. The last rays of the Western Ocean sunlight were rapidly fading. If this ambush was orchestrated by the Styx priests, after nightfall, they should be arriving soon. Chapter 550 Night Battle, 2. As the last ray of light faded from the horizon, plunging the city into darkness, the first wave of the ancient god's followers' attack arrived. A cloud of thick yellow sand suddenly rose from the flat ground. The Hash caravan had roamed the Black Desert for over 30 years, and to be frank, they had witnessed every battle this land had to offer. 30 years ago, the deserts surrounding Memphis were plagued not only by sand bandits from the Mediterranean, but also by freedmen. Old Hash had witnessed the sand puppets controlled by the Stygian priests, and after suffering several setbacks, he had developed his own experience in combating these elemental creatures. First, they had to be detected. The Stygian priests' powers were greatly enhanced at night, crucially because the silent, accumulating sand was extremely difficult to detect. By the time they noticed, the sand mummies had already solidified into humanoid forms around them. These creatures were invulnerable to weapons, and any blow from their bodies only released a stream of sand. As long as they were in the desert, they could readily use the floating sand to fill their bodies. It would be impossible to completely eliminate them using the same methods used on mortals. For these reasons, Satyr first illuminated the streets surrounding the inn, allowing the caravan to be alerted to the sand mummy's approach before they approached. Secondly, he ordered all members of the caravan to close the doors and windows, plugging the cracks with linen to prevent even a wisp of sand from entering. My guess was correct. It was these high-ranking priests of the Temple of Anubis who lured us into the city and ambushed us here. Huh? How could this happen? We're merchants. They need our goods. What's the point of ambushing us? The hash caravan could clearly see the brown dust swirling in the streets, swirling like living creatures. Several bandaged figures loomed through the dust. They were the sand mummies controlled by the Styx priests. Don't panic, Satyr roared, instantly silencing the buzz of conversation in the inn lobby. Don't panic. As long as you understand your opponent, they're not to be feared. I need you to lay down your swords. Using weapons meant for mortals against elementals is useless. The front team, take up torches and fire pots. The rear team, raise their water cannons. Execute Plan 4. Silence fell upon the room. Sa stood at the front, holding a massive torch. Behind him, 8 of the strongest horsemen formed a battle formation, 4 in front and 4 in the back. The famine was not large, so the lobby wasn't open. Cramming everyone into the cramped space wouldn't only hinder the effectiveness of the flames, but also risk losing more men. During the 7 years of fighting the Turkic descendants, Sa's cavalry regiment had seen plenty of battle. Even after long retirement, the combat instincts honed over a lifetime of battle hadn't diminished. Sa knew that simply sealing the gap would only protect against a surprise attack from the sand mummies, not stop their onslaught. With 2 crisp snaps of glass, several hard boulders shattered the glass, and the swirling sand outside the window finally poured into the room. Firepot man, throw it, Sa roared, making half a body length clear. Behind him, 4 laborers ignited a black clay pot and tossed it with all their might through the shattered window. The heavy pot didn't travel far. It shattered on the ground, and the flames immediately ignited the kerosene inside. The blazing flames then ignited the dry wood buried outside the inn. A towering wall of flames rose up around the inn. This was only the first step. The laborers throwing the fire pots withdrew after completing their tactical maneuver. Following closely behind them, the second group withdrew several bottles of magic essence emitting a dim fluorescent green and tossed them through the window onto the wall of flames. This was the evil fire magic essence the Hashma gang had just purchased from the Scorpion tribe. Thousands of years ago, poison masters of the Scorpion Temple's Poison Master Path had discovered that they could combine scorpion venom, sulfur, kerosene, and meteoric iron to create a high-energy magic essence emitting a green flame. This demonic essence resembled the gunpowder commonly used by the Tang people, but in liquid form it was even more violent and powerful. When thrown into a flame, the violent psychic energy within the demonic essence merged with the flames, transforming them into an emerald green evil fire. Even the most incorruptible of stones and stones would struggle to survive this blaze. Ordinary caravan merchants entering the Lant Oasis would often exchange their wares for medicinal herbs that could heal mortal ailments. No merchants would choose to purchase the unstable demonic fire essence. If it were to ignite and burn an entire cartload of goods, it would be the most horrific tragedy. But this time, the lingering sense of urgency never faded. With an extremely abundant supply of goods, Old Hash purchased all the demonic fire essence in Akhenaten's shop. In the event of a subsequent battle against demons or even the outer gods during the journey, this substance would be incredibly powerful. If all went well, simply throwing this unstable, explosive substance into the desert on the return journey would result in only a small loss of goods. The last thing he lacked on this journey was cargo. His years of experience and astonishing intuition were once again at play. He hadn't expected the evil fire magic essence to come in handy shortly after entering the Mia Oasis. Haha. Are you finally here? On the rooftop, Old Hash, swathed in a black robe, practically blended into the darkness. He had already smeared his entire body with wolfsbane magic essence. The temperature in the black desert dropped dramatically at night, and the loss of body heat, combined with the magic essence masking the presence of life, made him extremely difficult to detect. Most people would collapse and lose their composure in the face of sudden danger, but Old Hash wasn't like that. The life or death situation actually cleared his mind. Deep down, he even felt an indescribable excitement. Pulling out a telescope from his pocket, Old Hash began to carefully search all nearby houses. Sand mummies are elemental creatures without intelligence. They cannot move independently. The appearance of the floating sand meant that within a few hundred meters, a Styx priest, hidden in the darkness, was manipulating them. The hastily assembled defenses of Set and his porters could only temporarily hold off the mummy's attack. To survive until tomorrow's sunrise, Old Hash had to find the Hidden Sticks priest. I know you're in one of these houses near me, please don't worry, who is whose prey? It's still unclear. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all, see you in the next video.